And welcome back to Mixed Media Live. We're back for another wonderful Monday full of awesomeness. It should be a good time. We're going to be talking about some of our favorite things, as per usual. First...
Is the video working?
Yeah.
Wait, what? What happened?
Normally, at least for me, normally where, there's mixed media on Skype, I see the stream, right, instead of you. But I don't see anything.
I see color bars.
Yeah, right.
Oh, on the Skype side.
I didn't even know we were starting.
Yeah, I was like,
normally I can see the countdown.
It is actually.
I'm pulling up on YouTube, seeing if we're actually.
Looks like it is actually working.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Sorry.
We might have to go blind on the host monitor side for a bit. I don't know what happened to my output my output stream. I wonder if it's because I changed the output resolution on the broadcast. That could be it. But sorry about that. But technical difficulties aside, which is kind of normal around here. We're back for our weekly awesome show where we talk about some of our favorite things. And before we talk about what the show is and what we're going to be talking about today, let's introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, and I own a company called Ariella.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer living in Los Angeles.
And I'm Irving Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and game developer.
Sweet, yes. And we together make up Mixed Media. And each of us co-hosts, we usually have our own topics for the week where we talk about some of our favorite things, which are movies, gaming, and music, and all the things in between and adjacent. So if you like any of those things, you'll definitely like some content. If you want to check out our catalog, we've got tons of stuff in there that will... give you very detailed random looks at really random topics. That's the best way to describe what we do on the show. But definitely check that out. You'll be surprised at some of the content that you'll find in there. But today we've got a packed show. We've got a review of 310 to Yuma's music, and we've got a very broadly scoped but very hopefully insightful look at the entertainment industry from a lot of different angles, like from the angle of empire, from the angle of economics, and from the angle of culture. It's gonna be good if I can pull it off. And that'll be my section at the back end, and in between will be our traditional arguing with Reddit segment, which should be fun as usual, finding random things to argue about from the internet. So that'll be the show. And so that sounds like a lot because typically we're streaming for like 3 hours or so. So if you want to see any of those things, and you're like, this is not that interesting, I'm going to come back later. Yeah, we don't take offense to that. That's okay. Just know it's a long show, so you can pop in and out and sample as you please.
You might be using the wrong microphone, by the way.
Probably on Skype. Probably not on live. Let me see.
Okay.
Yeah, let me change that. There we go. That should be correct now.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the show. So before we continue on and talk about our weeks, should give a shout out to 4 Awesome People, 99 Crime, Rob Sharma, Post. I haven't seen Post in a while, actually, now that I think about it.
I was literally just thinking that.
Yeah, I just had that thought in my head. Post, we miss you. Post and who did I forget? K Kairos, who all have platforms of some kind, so go look them up and find their stuff, except for Rob Sharma, actually. Oh, no, he does too. So yeah, thank you so much for them. They support us for $5 a month at mixedmedia.locals.com, and you can join them by going to mixedmedia.locals.com. So there we go. So how were guys' weeks?
It was okay. As seen in the Discord, I found out my service idea has been made free.
I know, I saw that. Yeah.
Well, not unfortunate. It's I guess it's a good thing. I don't know, dude. Well, it's mixed in terms of its value to the world, because the fact that it's free is cool, but like I could have done cooler things, like with the fact that it was not free and stuff like that, like the service I can provide, which I can still provide extra service or whatever, right? It's just that my job has been made like way harder suddenly. You know, it's like a giant like mountain placed in front of me. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is weird because usually I say
you
like,
got so unlucky though. Like that's just pure like. Like
yeah,
that doesn't happen, you know what I mean? Like everyone worries, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to develop someone, and someone else is like working on it. That like never happens. You know
I was gonna say like usually I said on this podcast before, like ideas are kind of like like I mean, it's like well they are a dime a dozen, so usually these two aren't going to take yours. People have their own idea or whatever, they'll be doing their own like project, right? Like the odds of someone doing what you're doing is probably pretty low, even if you like spout it out.
It's extraordinarily low.
Like,
yeah.
It's just like I don't know, literally like the most like the clearly $1 billion idea, and like I don't know, it's like it's very unlikely, normally. And this idea for a like a relatively niche idea, I guess I didn't think this would be like an obvious thing. Using there's actually like it takes some thought to implement. It's not very simple. I looked at the person's code because it's all open source or whatever, right? And we essentially did very similar things. And I was betting on the idea that nobody would make their users download FFmpeg. And he made their users download FFmpeg, and then he made it so that it automatically downloaded it for people, so it didn't even matter anymore. I was like, oh, well. That's, yeah. So, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't, like, it's like, there's so much code, like, I don't know if it's wise to just throw it out. There's so much stuff here that like could be
has
used.
Has this project gone public yet, or?
Yes, I found out about it because I was in the. I regularly check. Oh, so a lot of people have no idea what this is.
You should probably explain.
Like gibberish. So I've reviewed the game Yuma Hustle before, and I was creating a service for the game. Basically, people tend to share their replays of the game like pretty often, right? Especially in the Yuma Hustle server, a Discord server, there's a channel called Replay Sharing. People just post their videos of cool replays or whatever, right? The issue is the game has no built-in recording feature, right? So you can't like easily export a video and then put that on Discord or whatever, right? What you have to do is you have to get some recording software, either using the default Windows one or OBS or whatever it is, right? Record out you can replay your match, right? But it doesn't save a video. It saves a replay file that the game has to essentially regenerate, I guess. So you can you can record it with OBS or whatever yourself, and then you save that and you upload it, and then maybe if you're feeling fancy, you cut it, you trim down the edges of the OBS recording so that it doesn't show you fapping around in like the main menu and whatever, right? And you upload it, right? That's I mean that works, but a lot of people probably can't be bothered to share a replay because of that reason, or would rather an easier way. So my service was a mod that let you click a button in the game on the replay file, essentially in the replay viewer, and then it would send the replay file to my server that would render it out automatically and trim it correctly automatically, and then give them a shareable link, and that link would embed on Discord and stuff like that too. So, and I guess other platforms like Twitter or whatever, right? So you can easily share a link of that video. Essentially a one-click solution for what before was like getting software and recording and potentially editing if you wanted to, So it was like one button, and then maybe you pay like a small fee or whatever, because I cannot do that for free. I can't host such a server for free. So that's what I was doing. Someone made a mod that essentially let you record the game locally. So you don't get a shareable link. So I guess that's one thing, but you can just upload the video, right? Upload the video file to whatever platform, and I guess delete it when you're done. And yeah, that works. So I forget. I was going to say something before I started explaining the idea. Oh yeah, how I discovered it. So I was just every once in a while I checked the replay sharing channel on the Yuma Hustle server, essentially as part of my market research, I guess. I'm constantly just like watching pretty much,
that's how you do
like various aspects of Yuma Hustle. One of them is this replay sharing channel. It's very directly related to my to my idea. So I looked at it, and then someone was like, oh yeah, someone's having an issue where OBS was like lagging for them. It was causing their replays to lag, like there would be like frame skips and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's like a problem that this solves, right? Because some people's computers actually cannot handle recording. So offloading it to my server actually just solves the issue as well. And then immediately afterwards, someone was like, well, have you tried this Yomi Hustle recording mod? And I just was like, no way. I was like, no way. And I checked it out. I looked it up on the Steam Workshop. I'm like, no way. And then I went to the Yomi, there's a Yomi Hustle modding server as well. I checked there. You get there's like a channel for like, it's like a forum channel that says mod releases. I look at it and I see your only move is record is what it's called. I look at it and I'm like, oh, it is actually a real thing and people are using it. And that is unfortunate. Yeah, I got so unlucky because, as I said in Discord, there were two things that had to happen for this to go bad, right? Number one was when Discord upped their file size limit from 8 megabytes to 25 megabytes on a free, without paying for Nitro. Because before 8 megabytes is pretty constraining for a video, where you can upload short videos, but there are certain, like Yuma Hustle records that can get, replays that can get long enough where like that might not be enough, right? So it was like, oh, well, it's a link, so it no longer is a file, so it doesn't matter anymore, right? You can upload it as long as you want, replays, as long as my platform supports it or whatever, right? And they upped it to 25 megabytes. And I thought, that's kind of unfortunate for me, but, that's, net gain, I guess, I don't know. Plus, this still has, like, a use. And then this mod came out, and I was like, well, I actually don't, this is very, very, become from, like, oh, this could be a mainstream product, so, hey, this is, like, really niche now. It's for, like, people who, like, I don't know, have a lot of money to throw around and for some reason don't feel like using this mod for some reason, that is free and effortless. So, yeah, I don't know. There are definitely services that can provide around the idea or whatever and keep a lot of the software made and stuff like that. But, like, I don't know. It's like it's become a lot more risky now suddenly. And, yeah, I don't really know what to do. I don't know what the next step is.
Yeah. I don't know. That's very unlucky.
Yeah.
Any good news from your week, though, or?
I mean, that actually hit me pretty hard. I don't know why. I spent the first week gaming, pretty much. I was like, all right, I'm not thinking about this. It's just, I played Smite not too long ago for the first time. I don't like it, so.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Well, hopefully you can find a way to refigure it.
Yeah.
How about you, Ben? Oh. Issues.
Sorry, I don't know what. Yeah, the space bar was not unmuting me, so I had to click on it manually. Sorry. Yeah, my week was fine. I spent a decent amount of time, my free time. I spent like watching a lot of swing dancing videos from the last year's International Lindy Hop World Championship. I found that very fascinating. Other than that, like artistically, I don't know. I've been tossing some ideas in my head of some stuff I want to do for voice, flute, harp, and viola.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, what's the plans for it, actually?
Nothing too definite that I want to share right now, but thinking of some particular poetry that I am interested in setting.
Oh, that's very cool.
Some Robert Frost and T.S. Eliot.
Oh, very cool. Awesome. Interesting. That actually sounds quite exciting. So I don't know how long it'll take to materialize, but
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah.
Depends. I had to like set in stone exactly which poems I want to use. Although I think I know what I want to do. So
cool. Yeah. My week was kind of crazy. Well, towards the end of the week in particular, I had the most random stroke of luck happen to me, which I guess is the opposite of Nathan. I'm sorry. But I've mentioned on the last two episodes that I was doing a crowdfunding campaign for Scanning Dealey Plaza for a bunch of reasons that you can check out in those episodes. And I had some prominent researchers just, I mean, I emailed them, to be clear, but I had no like expectation of like a response, from these people. I got an email response, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, maybe they'll help me out, spread the word, that kind of thing. I can't really talk about the details right now because they're not completely set in stone, because there's a board that has to do a vote that will fund the whole thing, and more, which is kind of crazy. It might go from a sort of volunteer proposition to actually a business proposition, which wasn't, like, literally was not the goal. The goal was just to open source something and just pay for the material costs of the scan of Dealey Plaza, and to not make money off of it. Other than that, I was going to take an L on it. It was just sort of a public service sort of thing. And they were like, your goal is so low. We could write a check for like more than that. It's just like, oh, okay.
So they found like the Gives and Go page. Is that what it was?
Yeah, they found it, and they were like, $26.50. Like, that's it. I was like, yeah.
Are you able to say who it is?
That's exactly what I can't say right now. But once, so this coming weekend, I have a meeting with the board of this prominent organization. I'm going to be talking to them, and if they vote yes on the proposition, which I'm told is basically a shoo-in, I will be able to reveal the information post that. So next episode, yeah, I'll give the details over. But it's kind of a wild story, and I'm going to try to harness as much of the attention that's coming my way out of this really random project that was literally just like a whim, just like, oh, this is happening. I should probably just like, I can scan things for historical purposes, just kind of like, preserve history. And and this whole thing happened to be. So I'll have a story to tell next time, but I'm just kind of still floored by it. That it just randomly. This tells you, always put yourself out there. Just keep doing it over and over again. You never know what happens. Throw the line out. Maybe something will bite. Who knows? This doesn't normally happen to me, so that's kind of crazy. But the other thing is related to that project. I've decided to get my drone license. My FAA.
I actually don't know that was a thing, a drone license. I guess that makes sense.
Well, so if you're flying as a hobbyist, you don't need a license as long as you obey the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. But if you do anything for commercial purposes, which is literally anything for the sake of making money, right? Which is pretty broad. So even if you're a YouTuber and you expect to make money off of AdSense, even if it's like $5, right? You would still need a license. So that's how the FAA is able to regulate it, is because they're saying, well, it's commerce of some sort, and it's in the airspace, so therefore we can do something about it. That's why they can't regulate the non-commerce aspect of drone flying. Okay. So, so I've decided that I'm going to get my Part 107 license for drone flying, which means that my YouTube channel is going to get a lot more pretty, I think, as a result. Going to get some drone shots in there.
The drone, though.
Yeah, the drone. The reason I hadn't gotten my license is because drones are expensive, and it's just not worthwhile from most things I do, and I can make stuff completely happily without a drone. But now that I have an excuse because of this project to have a drone, it seems like the time is right. So I did a little bit of studying today and took a practice exam after about an hour and a half of passively listening to a study guide, and I passed it. So I think it's... I also happen to be kind of an aerospace nerd, so like that kind of helps a lot. So yeah, there's a lot of random like pilot's knowledge in there. 'Cause you have to know things about fixed wing aircraft. Tell me why, if I'm flying a quadcopter, I wouldn't have to know anything about a fixed wing aircraft. But I don't know. That's the rules. So yeah, I'm excited for that. That's pretty much how my week went.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. How about news?
I'm trying to get something. Give me a second, but you can go first, or Ben can go first.
Just I guess in terms of releases that are relevant for people who care about film scores, obviously John Williams, The Dial of Destiny, right? Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny. I guess a couple of days ago they did a like at the before the first screening in Los Angeles, they had John Williams conduct some of the music with an orchestra. There's a good YouTube video of that out there, so if you want to see that, you can. They didn't have the orchestra play the actual score along with the film, but John Williams conducting some of the stuff beforehand. I guess Asteroid City, which I don't really know anything about, but I keep seeing ads for it like every time I open up YouTube or anything, pretty much. I guess that's coming out, and that's got a score by Desplat, so probably a good score, even if the film is, I have no idea. It looks like it didn't look interesting enough for me to, I skip through it as soon as I can every time an ad comes up for it. So I don't know. And apparently, I think just yesterday, it was announced that John Powell will be scoring a new animated film by the studio that's responsible for like Despicable Me and Minions. The film called Migration, which announcement trailer had almost no footage, but apparently it's an animated film about a family of mallard ducks that are, I guess, presumably migrating somewhere. I don't know. But John Powell returning to animation, so yeah. Whenever that comes out in however many years, might be worth watching just because of the music. That's all I have.
Cool. Yeah, I don't really have much because I don't like the day-to-day film stuff has become kind of monotonous. It's the same like 3 stories of like, this new repeated concept, new repeated oxymoron. But the next iteration of the next boring thing flopped. It's like happening like regularly now. The Flash didn't do as well as expected. It didn't do like so bad that like they won't profit off of it, but it didn't do good. However, the bigger flop is Pixar's Elemental, and that grossed in its opening weekend, I think 26 million, 29
I've never heard that
million.
in my life, to be honest.
Yeah, see, I just saw literally, I think yesterday or the day before, like an ad on a bus going by. Man, like, wait, there's a new Pixar film? Like, what happened to Pixar's advertising? I had no idea.
I kid you not, I had no idea this film was happening.
Yeah, so if Pixar's not going to advertise it, I only heard of it because, like I said, I saw it for like 2 seconds on a bus passing by. Side of the bus passing by while I was at a traffic stop. Like,
yeah.
That's not good marketing. Which
no.
is kind of crazy for Pixar.
Yeah, and it might relate to my topic that we'll be talking about later, but I have no idea what the story behind these particular films are. I just don't have time. It's the same story every time, and we'll get to like the meta reasons later on in the show.
Actually, now I'm curious because I forgot. I know I saw something, but Pixar's a new film, and then I forgot about that until you mentioned it. I'm wondering, is it on Disney Plus, or are they waiting to release it?
Well, that would definitely relate to the.
I'm gonna checking on Disney Plus now.
Okay.
See if it's out there.
How strange! If I look up Pixar Elemental on YouTube, the first 4 videos aren't the trailer. It's the 5th one, and the 4th one is Elemental's colossal failure: how not to advertise a movie.
Ooh, maybe they tried some novel advertising technique.
The first 3 are from YouTube. Oh, this is new. YouTube is doing some wild thing where the first 3 are from ABC News.
Oh no, that's not new. That's just some topics trigger their news partners to be shelved first.
Thing. Yeah, I did not know it was a thing.
How did you not come across that?
Well, I don't look up news on YouTube, I guess. Why would I do that?
Yeah, it's not on Disney Plus.
Interesting. So then I really don't I really don't get it, but we'll have to dissect that maybe in a future time if there's an interesting reason for it. So yeah, there's that. That's all I have, because honestly, film news, I don't want to be negative about things, but it's just always negative, and I'm a filmmaker. It really hurts. So looking at it every day is not very fun, as you can imagine. So it's a sad state of things, but hopefully the education I will be giving in my segment later on in the show will help us to understand that it's not as simple as just like reading the headlines every day. We have to understand some underlying issues.
Nice. Is that it for your news?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I never as much news as I thought I would, but what I have is that Kick signed I don't know. I'm seeing various numbers here. I keep seeing $70 million plus and $100 million. I don't know which one it is. Some sort of either $70 to $100 million deal with XQC, non-exclusive. I don't really. That's kind of crazy to me. If it's $100 million, that would mean that the thing that's going like viral is that he's being paid more than LeBron James for doing like reacting to videos on the internet.
Wait, who is this?
XQC.
Oh, okay.
So
wait. This is exactly. Oh, I think I've talked about this on the show. People don't know how valuable media is. They undervalue themselves. That's a whole different conversation. I thought I talked about it on the show, then I remembered it. I don't think I have.
Mm.
So.
But yeah, so Kick has some. So Kick. I think I talked about it a long time ago. It's like a mystery platform. No one knows where it came from, seemingly. It's still somewhat shrouded in mystery, but according to Wikipedia, as more information on it now, apparently it's backed by Stake.com co-founders and their two names. Stake.com is like a casino website. And Kick's revenue split is 95% to the streamer, 5% to the platform. I don't know how this is sustainable in any possible way at all. In fact, I am almost certain it's not.
Yeah.
That is simply
probably
the
isn't.
answer. It is not.
Yeah.
Not even close. I think I don't understand how you're supposed to get back to profitable from a 95 to 5% split.
Oh, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
Yeah, this all relates to the topic of later.
Okay. Well, yeah, there is no platform in existence that I'm aware of that does anything similar to that in any similar category. Twitch actually changed their 50-50 split to 70-30, so, I'm trying to make it seem nicer, I guess, compared to 95.5. And Kick has apparently proposed paying all of his streamers hourly. What? If they meet these conditions. The conditions include the streamer being active for at least 4 hours per day out of 30 days in the month. The streamer is not sleeping. I assume they mean while streaming. Not sleeping without qualifying is kind of funny. But and the streamer has webcam on their face, and the streamer is in the age of majority. So. And if all four conditions were met, they would be paid $16 per hour. I don't know how trustworthy this random Wikipedia thing is, considering this Wikipedia article seems underdeveloped. And it says the conditions include these four things, and then it says if all these four things are met, then they'll be paid $16 an hour. So that would mean that those are the only four things. So I don't know. That's kind of strange, but yeah. Interesting.
Speaking of Kick, though, I've been thinking about. Well, I'm not been thinking. I made a Kick account for us. On Kick. I made an account. I'm not sure when I'll hook it up for streaming. I'm not sure if Restream supports it, which will heavily impact the decision as to whether we'll also stream to there. So you might be able to find us on Kick eventually if you enjoy that.
Nathan, did you see the announcement of Star Wars Outlaws a couple of days ago? 6 days
You're
ago,
muted,
maybe.
Nathan.
No?
You muted, Nathan.
My bad. I was just talking to myself. I heard about it. I don't remember. I don't remember if I ever saw anything of it. Oh, okay. Looking at my search history, I at least saw an article on it. But yeah, I don't really know much about it. But I think I mentioned this last podcast actually. I feel like that. Yeah, I mentioned that Ubisoft was making. Yeah, I remember now because it says Ubisoft. I remember saying something like this actually, like Ubisoft games are all kind of the same, but this might actually be a game that like the Star Wars universe kind of feels right for a Ubisoft type game. You know.
Really, I feel like I don't remember you saying that, but interesting.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I thought I said that, but I definitely saw this article. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's the like 10-minute demonstration video, whatever you call it, has gotten a lot of Star Wars fans pretty excited. So.
Ooh.
I mean, I don't know. Looking at the video, it really just seems like Ubisoft game, but like in Star Wars universe. I don't know, and which is not necessarily a bad thing because, as I said before, I feel like it's going to be a fitting setting, but it doesn't seem like anything too crazy, in terms of like I guess uniqueness is what I'm saying, but not that every game has to be unique,
Well, I don't know. I guess maybe some of what's making people excited is just like the topic itself, because dealing with the like underworld, Star Wars, criminal underworld, which is something that people have long wanted more of, right? Apparently, George Lucas was trying to create his own. I think it was literally called like Star Wars Underworld, something like that. A live-action show, but it ended up being too expensive to do, like, even conceptually. So he scrapped the idea, and then since then everyone's kind of been waiting for more content on the Star Wars underworld, and that's kind of what people thought the Mandalorian was going to be. And then nope, first episode he finds a cute little baby Yoda puppet, right? And so I don't know, I think that aspect has made some people excited.
Yeah, actually, I think that okay. They definitely did their research when they're choosing the company, because that is like essentially the like, I don't know, if all the Ubisoft games are kind of like the story is about some sort of like I don't know how to I don't know how to put this in a box, because I feel like I have to give a long description, which is not really a box. It's a very like loosely defined thing.
It's like the outsider, like the lone wolf, like
it's always like lone wolf, kind of like not like non-official, I guess. It's never like a or if it's official, it's like underground still. I think I'm saying. So like, for example, right, Watch Dogs is like the lone vigilante, right? He's like like a Batman type character essentially, right? And then you have like Assassin's Creed, literally an assassin. You have The Division, which is like people taking like the government has essentially more or less kind of collapsed, and like people taking like security into their own hands, kind of thing, or whatever, right? You have Ghost Recon, which is like, okay, they're official. Yes, this is like a government sponsored activity, but then you were a super soldier, so it has that sort of like lone wolf thing going on, and also it's like also clandestine as well, kind of like Assassin's Creed and whatever. Where you have like Far Cry, there's like, you just keep going on the line. It's like always this kind of like,
Far Cry
they're rebellious
Ubisoft?
or like.
I had no idea. Why didn't I know that?
Is it? Am I like imagine that? I don't want to say that like I was wrong. I'm like 90% sure. Like I don't.
I mean, you're probably right. I just didn't.
Yeah. Okay. It's Ubisoft. You mean like it was like a fact so clear in my head, and then I was like, wait, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Ubisoft.
Nice. Well, hopefully it's fun.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I don't know. I feel like the Ubisoft formula is, it works, I guess. I do know is the driving physics is going to be absolutely garbage, as it always is in Ubisoft games. So, but maybe it'll feel better because it's not real cars, floating things.
Yeah, that is true. Nobody drives a car in Star Wars.
Yeah. Sweet. All right, shall we go into our first topic of the day?
Sure.
What the heck? Brawlhalla is Ubisoft? Sorry, that was
No
a random
way.
They have to acquire that. That is
Yeah.
100% acquired. I was looking at the list of Ubisoft games. This is definitely. I'm just assuming that's acquired, but yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. All right. So Ben is on deck. Here we go.
Mixed media music.
Actually, as I can't see the.
That's true. Well, you're on now.
Okay, well, welcome to Mixed Media Music, the portion of Mixed Media Podcast dedicated to discussions of all things related to music, with a particular focus on media music and classical music. My name is Ben Costello. I am a flute player and media composer, and I am kind of responsible primarily for this segment, and I'm assisted by my co-hosts, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, so my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. I own a company called Ariella.
And I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a video game developer and 3D modeler. And I turn on the light in my room, so I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, today on Mixed Media Music, we are going to talk a little bit about generally we're going to be talking about the score for the, I think, 2007, I could be wrong on that year, movie 310 to Yuma. There was also a version in like 1961 or something like that. So I guess it's a remake film. Apparently the original is also somewhat of a classic Western. But I did not watch that. I watched the more recent one with the score by Marco Beltrami. And I want to focus on that, but also kind of contrast it a little bit with another film that I watched recently, James Bond: Live and Let Die. And also, it inevitably invites comparisons to our favorite, The Power of the Dog, and I say that sarcastically. It has to be compared in some ways to The Power of the Dog.
Oh no!
At least in its score.
Okay.
In the cinematic experience, absolutely no comparison. It is a far better film.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But that's not my primary point. I'm not here to discuss why it's a better film. I'll just say that, like, it's actually a Western, and it actually, like, it deals with the same, like, roughly similar topics, about, like, what does it mean to be a man in the West, I guess? But it does it in a far more nuanced way. And, like, yeah, it's somewhat obvious what's going to happen, but not in the same blatantly, like, where I'm smacking you over the, the head with the entire film in the first 30 seconds. And even so, like, you want to know, it actually has some depth to it. So apparently, like, the very ending, like, is slightly different than the original film. Though the original film was also an adaptation of, like, a very loose adaptation of a short story. Yeah. So, it's slightly different in that regard. So that's going to kind of, like, the very last scene kind of does dictate a little bit of the tone throughout. But anyway, on to the music itself. So this is a Marco Beltrami score. I'm not, like, a huge fan of Beltrami. He just, done some big things, nothing that I'm, like, terribly fond of. But I've heard a lot of great stuff about this score. So I figured I would watch the film. Again, good cinematic experience. So the music, it is not a, like, traditional Western score, right? This is not a Ennio Morricone, or I can't think of who the composer for Silverado was, or Dmitri Tiomkin. Not like a classic, big score, big orchestra Western score. It is mostly strings and guitar making up our ensemble, with some kind of sound design-esque sort of stuff, like synthesized kind of sound design for pretty good stuff for, I think, 2007. And I think it's a score that in a lot of ways fits in with all of the trends of today, in terms of, you know, just what kind of scores one would expect to see. But it does have like a few differences. So like like I said, the obvious comparison here is to The Power of the Dog, and the score for that, and which is superficially, I think, similar. But you know, there's a slight contrast in like the palette that I think Johnny Greenwood in Power of the Dog is mostly like even smaller string ensemble and like kind of edgy guitar and banjo. This is like a larger string section. There's more full in that way. But what I like about it is that this is a score that it doesn't, even though it's kind of a lot, it's not like a, you know, like I said, it's not a classic Western score. It's going to, you know, delve into, you know, the heroism of the characters and the ruggedness of a landscape and, you know, the tension of the gunfights. It's not doing that. But in contrast to something like The Power of the Dog, it's not giving things away either. So we have a much subtler score than like a traditional Western, much more muted palette in terms of its colors. And in general, you know, a lot of the music does tend to kind of fade into the background. It never really has a starring role, so to speak. It never really breaks out and does that much overtly. But it's got the subtlety of not giving the film away, unlike The Power of the Dog, where the music is also giving away everything.
Yeah.
No subtlety there. The music, to me, is kind of both atmospheric, but also a little bit of like a commentary on the inner world of particularly our main character. I think his name is Dan. And so in that respect, that, you know, there are clear ways in which it is like an inner commentary on what our main character is thinking. So in that way, I think it's like it's in some ways it's not, although it seems like it's ambient atmospheric, right, it's a little bit more tied, I think, to the inner world of the main character than and other important characters as well than a similar score today would be. Whereas, like, I would say, for instance, Power of Dog has absolutely no connection to any character. It's just, you know, it's kind of the meta commentary of our director, right? We know what's going to happen, and music is just telling us what's going to happen. So although it kind of employs a really similar palette throughout the film, it manages to create a lot of like moments of tension and like lesser tension, but like there's still always some tension because it is a kind of a tense kind of introspective film throughout. Right? There's never really any like moments where we can breathe easily in this film. There's always the kind of the sense of dread hanging over our main character's head because he knows what task he has volunteered himself for, which is basically to transport this outlaw, this famous, like, you know, I guess robber out in Arizona. He's been captured, and our main character has volunteered to be amongst a group of people who are taking him to the town of Yuma to taking him to the town of, I think, Convergence, so he can get on the 310 train to Yuma prison. And if he does this, he's been offered the reward of $200, which he needs because he's massively in debt on his ranch, and I guess his son is dying. His youngest son is dying of tuberculosis, and he's spent all his money trying to pay medicine for his son. So he volunteers for this dangerous job because this outlaws, his band of men is still out there, and they are going to come and try and find him.
Yeah.
So we have his dread throughout the whole film, knowing that he's this kind of wicked band of outlaws going to come and rescue their leader, amongst a whole bunch of other Western difficulties and dangers. So anyway, Beltrami manages to create, like I said, always this underlying sense of dread, but lots of peaks and valleys of tension, despite kind of keeping a very similar palette throughout, which I think is pretty interesting. And the way he does that, and I know we've talked about this many times on our show, is he really emphasizes the concept. I'm not sure that he's directly thinking of this in explicit terms of heartbeat, but to me that's what he's going for, right? In moments of greater tension, there's a very clear heartbeat kind of thing in the background, and that moving at faster tempos, right, is what's helping to build up attention. And that's I like that. I to me, as I've expressed in many of our past shows, I think that's a really effective way of conveying a lot in music, right? Just kind of get in touch with the human body and the human body's physical responses to things. And the primary way we can feel that rhythmically is through our heartbeat. So I think that's quite effective. It's the kind of thing that is completely lacking in something like Power of the Dog. There's also a lot, although we have a really similar palette, there's a lot of variety within the palette, kind of going in between this larger string thing, and then this much more intimate kind of and lyrical guitar stuff, solo guitar, which is used primarily when we have our main character, I think is played by Christian Bale, and he kind of is being faced with something, some kind of moral dilemma, and we just kind of get a look at him. He doesn't say anything, but you can tell what he's thinking and feeling as he tries to weigh the morality of his choices. So I think that's effective. We have moments of this kind of introspective lyricism, again, absent from the parallel, or kind of maybe not parallel, but the closest score I think of recently, Power of the Dog. None of that. No lyricism. No real intimate. What is the character thinking?
Yeah.
And there are certainly some small motifs. I don't think they have any particular meaning. Some of them are just two notes, just a vague kind of idea of a main theme. But at least they help us be anchored in something, even if you probably don't notice it when you're watching the film, because they're not oh, I'm gonna hum this melody when I walk out of the theater. I think they help ground what is happening musically. They kind of just continue setting the scene and letting us know, I guess, when moments of higher action are going to happen. So I think it's an effective score. It's not anything truly fantastic, but I think it's got some things in it that, although in some ways I think it's a precursor to something like The Power of the Dog, I think, and just in general, filmmaking, scores in the 2010s and 2020s, it still has some some personality to it that I don't think I see as much in more modern scores, especially something like The Power of the Dog. I also I happen to watch it very close to watching Live and Let Die, the James Bond film, I think 1971. Not the greatest James Bond film at all, although I love Paul McCartney's title song. I'm not going to go into the film itself, but interesting to me on the topic of heartbeat. I know we've talked about this with James Bond films in the past, but just I think kind of drove the point about like heartbeat and heart rate. Kind of drove that point home to me watching this. Is that Live and Let Die? The score is actually by George Martin, the producer for the Beatles, and not by James Barry. It's the first score that's not by James Bond's score that was not by James Barry. In general, I don't think it's nearly as effective as James Barry's scores, other than Paul McCartney's in the Wings, that title track, Live and Let Die, classic. George Martin certainly uses that a lot in the film, like the main melody from that, which is nice. That we have that connection anyway to our title song. In general, I think he does a better job with like local color, which is kind of in some ways intentional, right? It's about this leader of a fictional island in the Caribbean and his kind of island, kingdom, so to speak, and like the culture of this island. So he kind of gives us a lot of Caribbean kind of sounding stuff, and like also contrast with like Harlem jazz. So I think George Martin is good at like that kind of stuff, like musical imitation of different sound worlds, but the score itself isn't quite as good as John Barry. But he does follow John Barry's tradition of action scenes being kind of slow pulse, and just kind of slowly unfolding. Like we definitely have this pulse, but it's this kind of heartbeat kind of pulse, but it's slow, and there's kind of this cool jazzy kind of stuff on top of it that like lets us know that this is kind of dangerous scene for James Bond, but he's so suave and cool, right? He's maintaining that low heart rate, because he knows he's in control, even when he has to run on the backs of a bunch of alligators and crocodiles to escape from our villains in a kind of improbable scene. It's okay. He's pretty cool about this. He's not worried for 1 second he's about to die. So the jazz, right? That's he's cool, right? He's he's James Bond, right? And the heart rate, right? He's like we can tell that this is supposed to be like a tense scene, but he's in complete control. He's not sweating at all, right? He's James Bond. Right. So to me, like the contrast between like action scenes with like no tension, it's kind of slow pulse, right? In contrast to like the variable but like often kind of speeding up definite pulse of 310 to Yuma in more tense scenes. To me, it just really drove home the point that I've emphasized for probably 2 years now on our show of heart rate is a really important and kind of effective means of conveying tension amongst other things, but tension is what it's really good at conveying, because it has that connection to the human body and the human body's response to physical things, and like we as audience can feel that, and like it literally pulse of music affects our own heart rate, right? So a whole lot of stuff with music and like physics of the human body, like physical response. So it's something to keep in mind if you are a composer.
Pretty good. Pretty cool. Yeah. I'm excited to see it. I have it right here.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't see.
I heard the noise. But
I was searching for it in my stack of Blu-rays, but yeah, if you're on stream, you can see it.
Yeah, I haven't put it my rating on Letterboxd yet, although I'm leaning towards at least 3.5, maybe 4 stars.
Okay.
Maybe it's probably a high. I probably don't have the same sort of rating criteria that you do, Irving. Though, so I'm sure you wouldn't give it that high of a score. But
so is that well, I guess one standard way to do it would be like, do you recommend it or not?
Oh, I definitely recommend it. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Sweet. Well, I'm excited. Very cool. So is that it?
That's all I have. Yes.
Sweet. Yeah. If I saw some people trickling in on Rumble. If you guys want to chat, you've done it before. You've made my day before. You can chat again and let Ben know what you think about 310 to Yuma. Okay.
Specifically the recent remake of the film, in case you missed that.
Yes.
Yes.
Sweet. Okay, cool. Well, shall we go on to arguing with Reddit then?
Sure.
Sweet.
I don't know when the transition is going to happen, so.
All right, I'll cue you in once the transition's over. How about that?
All right.
Okay, here we go.
Mixed Media Gaming.
Go.
Welcome to Mixed Media Gaming. Today is my Arguing with Reddit segment, where I look at some Reddit posts that my co-hosts have found that I've never seen before, and I'll be giving you my live reaction, my live response to the potentially hot takes. I also picked one out for myself, so I do know what that is. I haven't really thought about it too much, although I already had like pre-existing strong opinions, so I guess I have thought it out. Just not that one specifically, I guess. But yeah, it's your first time watching. Greetings. I don't know where I was going with that.
Greetings, Earthlings.
Yeah. I can't even see the hot takes on the screen. So yeah, some technical difficulties going on right now. I'll have to open the YouTube video, and it might be a little bit delayed for me. I guess Twitch would actually be faster. I'll open the Twitch one. But yeah, that's what's going on. We should introduce ourselves. We should introduce ourselves again. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
My name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I'm based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
Nice.
I will add, I actually put 2 things in for you, Nathan, but luckily I put in 2 things because one of them was just like a 1-minute video, like here's like some footage of my game. What do you think of it? I thought it was kind of funny, but I guess can't really see that. So luckily, I also had one that's text based.
Okay, that's good.
So.
Okay, well, we'll start with that one then, Ben, if you want to describe it.
Yes, I can pull it up. I have to remember what it was. I remember the video much more. Let's see. Yes. All right. So this person says this is an AWR game development. Seems like a newer community.
I wonder if this came around after like some Reddit community went private or something.
Yeah,
could be.
I think game dev is
yes.
no longer
I think
active.
game dev is like I think game dev is one I've been on before. I was checking it out. Let me see if it's private.
Yeah. So this is from AWR game development.
Okay.
So this person says, "Hey, I'm working on a game prototype right now based on an existing IP. The game is not so tightly connected that it has to be part of the franchise, but I'd still like to try and sell the idea to them. My main questions, aside from some businessy when to send, who to send to, is how much influence should I include in the prototype? Should my placeholder graphics be clearly based on the source? Should I include side mechanics from the series or stick to the original mechanisms? If it makes a difference, it is a small series, 3 games and 1 remake. So, do you think this is a good idea? You're making a game prototype based on a small franchise, and that you want to try and sell the idea to this studio, and if so, should you base your placeholder graphics on the source material or not?
I think the answer is obvious to everybody.
Well, I'm just kind of glad because I've never even like considered this idea. So I really did.
I thought it was I don't know. I wanted to see what your response would be. I know what I assumed what your response would be, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, I have no experience in this kind of thing, because I didn't know this was a thing that people did or thought to do. Do people do this in like movies or music?
No.
They
They don't.
you don't make like a short film. Be like, hey Disney, this is my new Star Wars short film. Like,
Well, a
you
short
wanna
film is
make a-
different.
they
Yeah.
actually, there are some people who do like really good short
They do that.
Star
Okay.
Wars things, but they have like
Yeah.
a special license from Lucasfilm where they can
Oh,
like,
so they already have like kind of like, they already been like in
Yeah,
like
you
at least
have to,
one
like-
door beforehand.
yeah, you had to. I think you had to like apply to Lucasfilm for like a license to like
That's
use
different.
Star Wars, and like then you can't monetize it at all. But there are some like a couple of there's like a couple of people who have done this, and there's one really good one that's like based on the lives of stormtroopers, but like they come out with like one every like like it's like 5 minutes every like 8 months or something. Really good quality though. I think I can't remember what it's called. Yeah. So
That's definitely
it's probably a little bit different though.
that's a very different situation. That is definitely like game changing. If you have you're already like a known figure to like the IP holders or whatever.
But even then, like a short film is like I mean, you can make a short film for fun really cheaply, like if you're really like and you don't mind getting nuked, you know what I mean? Like like a dirt cheap, just like little fun thing in your backyard. But like that's a bit different. And
The
what
closest
this
thing I've
person's
heard
saying.
of are modders becoming developers for the company for the game they're modding. But I've never heard of like
I've heard that too. Yeah.
yeah, I've never heard of like hey like the X game series exists. I'm making like something similar. I'm prototyping something similar. And you pitch it to them because they're not publishers either. Most likely, they're not a publisher. So it's not like there's something that they're like equipped to do. They might not even have like There's not like they're not set up to do that kind of stuff. That's not their area of business. And even developers that are publishers like Paradox, like they're still like pretty separate entities. There's like the publishing side of Paradox, and there's the developer side of Paradox, which is Paradox Interactive, and it's like that for other like Ubisoft as well. It's not like there's like one giant team that's like the same people who are coding the games are also like determining what the next game they're gonna take under is. It's like separate entities almost. So yeah, this just seems like a bad idea. But what actually is the question? Should I? How much?
Should you use
I
the
include?
actual IP? Is really the question here.
Should I placeholder? I mean, I don't even like. I don't know. Okay, well, here's the thing. If you were literally just submitting it to them only,
Yeah.
right? Like, I guess you should, right? I guess you could use the IP, right? I'm assuming they're not gonna like sue you for like showing them their own, and them alone their own like models or whatever, right? I assume they don't care. Yeah, and it would help them understand. Once again, I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just answering the question. Like so. I assume that it would help them, put every see something that's more like their final product. See their models or music or whatever kind of IP actually in the game or whatever. But I mean, if it's like a public thing, which I don't know why you do that, I maybe not, and also don't even do it. Don't try. So this is, I don't know, some really extreme circumstance where, I don't know, there's always a exception to the rule, but this is a pretty hard rule in my opinion. So
you're saying that I shouldn't pitch my game with airplanes playing basketball to the creators of Rocket League?
probably not.
Especially not with their assets. That's definitely not a good idea.
With cars.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like, I can imagine, like, if, okay, I can see it in the case where it's so small, you really know those people. Like, I mean, you may not, I mean, if you literally know them, that would make this whole story completely different, but, like, you really know them from the outside, you know what I mean? And you know your audience so well that you know that they'll be so impressed. Maybe there's some pattern, they've done this before, or, like, I don't know. There could be a case that this might be a good idea, but I mean,
I feel like if you're there,
that's a lot of effort to expend.
If you know, if you're there, you already know that like you have like a golden opportunity here. You know, you probably aren't going to be asking these questions on.
Yeah, exactly. You really have to have high confidence of this fact.
Yeah.
Cool. The second one is from me, and I'm trying to remember what I did. Let's see. Oh, this is just a sort of basic publishing question, but it's when should games be published on Steam? I know you've done some research on Steam and stuff, but like this is like what time of year, like that kind of thing.
From what I understand, it doesn't actually matter that much. Like so, people include. Well, wait. I might be getting that mixed up with the time of day you post something. I can't remember. That's a very big distinction to make.
Well, here's some more context from the post itself.
Sure.
When should I put my page up? The store page. So actually, there's two questions here. I know I shouldn't release the game now, but when do I put my page up? The store page needs to be live for 2 weeks before I can sell the game. Should I put it up now so I can post it for sale sometime after the sale, or should I put the page up in the middle / after the sale, then wait 2 weeks from there? And the further context is that there's a Steam sale that's impending.
Well, regardless, okay, so there's like a different issue that's like maybe not evident, is the fact that you shouldn't be putting a game on Steam and then immediately 2 weeks later releasing it. Think about like a movie trailer, for example, right? You don't put it up 2 weeks before the movie comes out. It's not enough time to generate hype and whatever.
Unless you're Pixar and
I was thinking that
Elemental or whatever. The name of the
I don't even know the name.
Yeah.
But unless you're doing some Pixar shenanigans, I guess. But but still, as you can see, well, did it sold well?
No, very bad.
Okay, yeah, so it wasn't a good idea. Yeah, okay.
It's the worst in history, actually, for Pixar.
Okay, it really was not a good idea. So,
not including inflation, by the way. So it's worse than.
Oh,
it's really bad. It's worse than, I think the worst one was Ratatouille on opening weekend.
That's interesting because I feel like that's kind of like a classic, you know.
Yeah, sometimes things take time to.
Pretty
get
much
the ball
all
rolling.
of theirs are earlier ones are classics, though.
Yeah, that's true. I guess they had high standards, but
that was $2,007, man. It made less than Ratatouille made in $2,007. That's kind of bad.
That's unfortunate. Well,
yeah.
Well, yeah, don't do what they did. So what you should be doing is generating as many wish lists as possible. So once you put your Steam page up, people can click on your wish list button, which from what I understand, I've heard is multiple sources is like the a good indicator on how well it'll sell. There's like some multiple you can multiply the amount of wish list by to get like approximate sales. That being said, it does vary wildly. Some people have like crazy amount of wish lists and get like 2 sales. Some people it's the other way around. But typically speaking, it's like a general sort of trend. And certainly more wish lists is better. And you should that is a metric you might want to target increasing or whatever. Although I feel obligated to say, because I feel like someone watching this would be like, I was like that like principle of like when I forget like what it's called or whatever, but it's like when you have like a a metric you're trying to meet and no longer becomes a useful metric, whatever that is. I don't know if you guys heard of that before, but I've heard that many times.
Not sure.
I think the idea is because like people are like, for example, let's say you actually this is okay. We use the example of wish lists. Let's say I'm like some very like dissociated, detached like executive of a big company, and I hear wish lists are the what are they called? The KPMs, right? Key performance metrics. Is that what it's called? I don't know. Well, the metric we should use to evaluate how well something's going, and so you want to increase the amount of wish lists as much as possible. Well, you can easily inflate like wish lists by like getting a bunch of people who are not interested in it, but like throwing ads at them so many times that like maybe they'll wish list it. You know what I'm saying? And so like the wish list metric no longer ceases to be as useful as it once was, or as like representative of people who actually like want the product or something. Because like you become more concerned with like just getting those numbers up and not getting a useful thing out of those numbers. If you get what I'm saying, does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like I've heard this argument so many times that like, look, I'm not saying that you need to like like I don't know like throw this like wish list page at like literally anybody who will hear you. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I guess that wouldn't hurt. But I'm not saying that getting the biggest number is the best thing. You want the correct audience to actually be the people who are wish listing or whatever, right? So, anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent to say you want wish lists, right? So I wouldn't do like a 2-week thing. I might do multiple months actually, to get wish lists and stuff like that. That can take a long time. So yeah, I'd rethink the entire plan, I guess is what I'm saying. But as for like, okay, should I release before a sale? Well, typically what people do is when they release games, they release with a sale price, essentially. So they come out and they're like, oh, it's discounted for the first X amount of days, maybe a day or whatever that it's out. So presumably you would have your own sale. So I'm not really sure if that's that useful. I guess if you're doing it with another generalized sale, then you're competing with all the other sales going on, which is not all too great. And I guess the idea would also be that we wouldn't want to do it immediately after a sale because people have spent their money or whatever. Although I've heard the argument that like people who like your game aren't going to be like, oh, well, I spent like all $3 of my dollars on this other game, so I will simply never get this game ever. They'll recoup the money at some point, and they'll just get it anyways eventually. So I'm not entirely sure how much it matters, but definitely do not release your game 2 weeks after sale, and 2 weeks after. Once again, there are exceptions to the rule. So maybe if like I don't know, you have like someone who's like, I'll buy 1,000 copies if you release it in 2 weeks. Okay, so maybe you want to do that. I don't know when that would happen, but maybe, or something super time relevant or something. I'm not sure what that would be, but yeah. Cosmeteer is like I think that game was like in beta and on Steam wishlisted for like maybe over a year or something like that, and that game ended up being extremely successful. Which is not saying that is like the thing you have to do, but it worked for them. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting. So the final one is from yourself, Nathan.
Yes. Okay, so I will finally. I don't think I may have like touched upon this topic, but like I have to debunk this once and for all.
Okay.
Officially. So yeah, the post is. I'm kind of waiting for you to put on the screen because I don't remember the title, but okay, there it is. I see it. I think Linux might be a superior platform for gaming at this point. Now, if you ever use Linux and you ever gamed, okay. You probably realize this is either incredibly false or you're playing only certain types of games. We'll get to that. This is from r/Linux Gaming, which I feel like has this post like every month. Every month it's like, dude, this year is the year of Linux Gaming. Like, it's going to be crazy. Have you heard about Steam and Proton? Have you guys heard about that? No? Well, look at that. They're doing some great things with Steam or whatever, or with Linux or whatever. It's like, okay, at the end of the day, you still can't play Valorant on like the most basic fundamental game on a Linux machine. Okay, you can't play a lot of games that are just normal to play. I don't know if you can play Rainbow Six Siege anymore, but there was a time where you can't play like Paladins, which is a game I just coming to mind because I reviewed it not long ago. I don't remember if you can play Rocket League or not. There are a whole host of games you cannot play on Linux. why like it is so. I don't know what argument you could possibly make for the superiority of Linux or Windows at this point for gaming. Now, if you read the thing, one thing he says is that it's quote, it's actually easier to get up and running, more performant than Windows. If he's talking about God of War. So, first off, I wasn't aware that. For full disclaimer, I use Linux normally. I'm using Linux right now. Linux is my normal operating system. Okay, so no hate to Linux, but the gaming scene sucks. I can't lie. So easier to get up and running. What a strange thing to say on Linux, where like ease of use is not typically something that's like cared about. That is not like a great like not to say that it's entirely discarded, right? Things like Ubuntu are like big on like like anyone. I honestly believe anyone can use Ubuntu. It's not a very hard thing to Linux is definitely talked about in a more harsh way than it needs to be. It's definitely not like super hard. Maybe if you're using like I don't know like vanilla Arch or like Gentoo and you gotta do like terminal commands every moment of your life, then I guess maybe that's a bit more advanced. But this is a very strange like argument for like people wanting to go to like Linux is like, oh hey, it's easier to play games. You know what? It's harder. The entire rest of your operating system. Okay, I don't know why that would be like suddenly like that's all canceled out. If suddenly for some reason God of War is easier, I don't actually know how that'd be the case. But let's say it was actually easier, considering God of War, I'm sure, is a simple launcher install, and then you just download the game. I'm sure it's that easy on Windows, right? I'm sure it's basically the same thing on Linux. Okay, maybe downloading the launcher is easier if you download it via your package manager. I don't know, I'm not really sure. I guess to say more performant, that there are many tweaks you can do on Linux. Now, there are many videos discussing tweaks you can do to Linux to make the games more performant, many things you can download. They're all typically very marginal. It's like you do all this work and you get like, I don't know, maybe something like plus 10 FPS on a 60 FPS game, which is pretty good, That's a pretty good percentage difference. But sometimes it's like 3 FPS, and it's like sometimes it's like 0 basically. It's like I don't really know if this is like that useful. I'm not sure if I'm going to hop operating systems for 10 extra FPS on a 60 FPS game. Unlikely. So the person talks about a specific Linux distro called Nobara. I'm not familiar with this. I don't really know much about it. But it says Nobara is pretty much game ready for AMD GPUs on first boot. Okay. This is not new. I use Manjaro. Manjaro is also pretty much AMD ready, I guess, on first boot. It's not like a revolutionary thing. Windows is also ready for AMD GPUs on first boot. This is the expected thing for an operating system to have, right? Is that when you load it up, your GPU actually works, right? It's not like a I don't know why it'd be like a interesting point, okay? Yes, you should update the system first. Nobara Sync updates everything in one command. Once again, this is a standard feature of operating systems, is that you can update everything at one click, pretty much. I guess technically on Windows, there's no package manager, at least no default one, so it's not like when you update Windows, you update all your other software, right? But in terms of the things that are core to getting a game to run fine, what I'm saying? Windows itself will update. All other Linux distros all have an update in one command. Manjaro has it. Ubuntu has it. And, everything in between has it. Well, technically Ubuntu is in 2 commands actually, I believe, because you have to do update and upgrade. But that's besides the point. What does it say? Downloading drivers. Okay. I have never actually downloaded a driver in my entire life, by the way. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. But no, that's not true. I did download AMD drivers one time. Now, you cannot tell me that downloading AMD drivers on Windows is a harder process than downloading Linux or installing Linux onto your computer. This is entirely negates the entire point, right? When I installed Manjaro, I've installed Manjaro multiple times. I've installed many Linuxes many times on various computers. You have to do partitioning and stuff like that. The act of partitioning, not that it's a hard thing to do, but for someone who's not technologically inclined, doesn't want to do a whole bunch of reading and stuff like that, downloading a driver is definitely just way easier. You just look up AMD drivers, click first non-sponsored link probably, I should say. Then find your GPU. Or actually, I think AMD software will auto-detect for you. You don't have to do that. You download what's it called? AMD... I can't remember what it's called, but their software, right? Whatever it's called, and it'll just figure out what driver you need and it installs it. It's not really a big deal, you know. No installing and setting up MSI Afterburner. Why would you do that? Why would you? Who installs MSI Afterburner? Like the average user, you install MSI Afterburner for overclocking. I guess maybe there's a way to overclock your system on Linux without using MSI Afterburner. I never tried because my GPU cannot be overclocked basically because I've tried it on Windows. It does not work very well. Okay, once again, this is once again negated by the entire operation of installing Linux. It's still way easier at this point in the process. No forcing frame rate caps and fiddling with driver settings to optimize. Who has ever done this? Have you ever done this? I've never heard of anyone who's fiddled with their driver settings. That's crazy. I've never heard of that in my entire life. Not having to find random PowerShell scripts to remove all the extra crap and telemetry from Windows. Okay, you know, okay. That doesn't really have to do with gaming, okay, unless you could say, like, oh, the telemetry is, like, reducing performance by, like, 0.5 FPS. Like, I don't really know how big of a deal that's going to be. I'm assuming it's not particularly much. That's not really a gaming-specific thing. No downloading of esoteric drivers for chipsets. Network chips. By the way, my network chip does not work on Linux, so once again, you have random things will just not work on Linux, by the way. My Wi-Fi card does not work on Linux. I have a very jank system going on to get my computer to actually connect to Wi-Fi, which is like it involves an Ethernet cable and like essentially a Wi-Fi to Ethernet system, which is very jank and should not exist. That's what goes on my computer. I don't even have to install a browser. Once again, you have to install Linux. I don't know why this would be a problem. If you're installing Linux, why would installing a browser be hard? Let's not pretend that anyone actually wants to use Edge. Actually, you know, the percentage of Edge is like way higher than Firefox, which is default on most Linux operating systems. This is the most uneducated post I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, Windows even makes you use its hideous storage to get basics like video codecs now. I actually don't know anything about downloading video codecs. I've never done that my entire life. I've also never used the Microsoft Store like more than 3 times, and those are both just testing things out and then deleting them promptly afterwards. So I never had to use it. And let's not pretend that it's basically impossible to get a bunch of software on Linux, anyways. So like downloading things on Windows technically is, I would say, it's harder, but you actually do it, which is nice. Nabarra is gaming optimized from the word Go and enabling Mongo HUD for performance monitoring in the tick box. Once again, I am very sus that these optimizations are anything more than a few extra FPS. Notice that every AAA game these days has shader compilation stutter, not so on Linux when playing them through Steam. I've actually never noticed, I know this is like a big thing people talk about, never noticed it. I've never noticed shader compilation stutter. It's possible I'm not playing like these AAA games that have this issue, but I don't know. Steam will install the shaders for you at a time. Might just be that my system is perfectly suited to Linux. I genuinely prefer gaming on Linux now. Couldn't imagine myself saying this a few short years ago. Okay. Now, I do understand the idea of Linux being better as a gaming platform for certain people. I understand that. The title of, I think Linux might be superior platform for gaming at this point, has there's no logical universe where this might be the case for the average person, not even anyone close to the average person, right? Because the average person is playing things like Valorant and League of Legends and things like this that do not work on Linux. Not even just being interested in games like this. Pretty much anything with an anti-cheat will not work on Linux. Many random games will not work on Linux. And many things will work but are worse experience. So consider things like GTA 5. I played GTA 5 on Linux. When I alt-tab out of the game, my computer kind of breaks. So that's there's random things that just don't really work smoothly. The advantages he lists for Linux are performance increases, which are okay, maybe you get an extra, I'm being generous, very generous here, you get a 10% performance boost on the average game. I don't even think that's true. Let's say that happened. You have a whole host of hundreds of games, thousands of games you cannot play, basically, right? Even if you try it in a virtual machine, your performance will be some of the worst. It'll be very bad, and it'll be very unplayable for nearly all games that are not trivial. So, is Linux a superior game platform than Windows? No, not by basically any useful metric. and it is not for most people. It is for certain specific people. Me, as someone who uses Linux 90% of the time, I still go to Windows for gaming. At this point, I don't even check to see if it's supported on Linux. I just don't care anymore because it's probably not. to be quite honest, types of games I play, at least, I mean, and I tend to play a lot of multiplayer games, which is why that would be the case. But if you play a lot of single player games and you don't care about ever playing any multiplayer game and hoping that it works, then you're probably good. And by the way, I've also tried to play Jedi Fallen Order on Linux single player game. Did not work. I tried to play. You can't play Ghost Recon. I've tried Ghost Recon as well. Does not work. So maybe I've been incredibly unlucky, but the only game I actually play on Linux is Yomi Hustle because it's so lightweight, and I'm like, oh no, now it supports Linux officially. Actually, it used to not. But the reason why it's like this thing takes no time to open, so if it like crashes, I don't really care. So yeah, that is my opinion on Linux gaming.
Cool.
And
well, F for this person.
It'll never be every year. They always say like, dude, this is the year for Linux gaming, and it's like it never is.
So the first comment is, we are getting there.
I mean, an incredibly slow space. I agree in particular. I think Gamescope is a major venture for Windows gaming. More crashes when trying to switch focus or name on. Am I like having like the best Windows system ever? Whose game crashes on Windows regularly? It's not a thing. Not like a problem I've had in like a very long time. For minimizing games, it doesn't really happen to me. I don't know. Let's be honest. It's not really. Still many things like anti-cheat games and things like Game Pass are not working well, but Linux gaming surely has come a long way. Many work without issues. The devs who won't do the 4 non-code steps to turn them on. Okay, here's the thing, right? As a developer, see, on principle, I would like to support Linux games as a developer because I don't like Windows. that is really the reason, right? That being said, I can totally understand. I don't blame anyone for not, putting Linux on. For one, for many games, is a lot more than doing 4 non-code steps. For example, if you're a game like DCS World or Arma, they run their own custom engines, which they'd have to actually make work on another platform, which is not trivial like pursuit at all, not even close.
Yeah.
2, a lot of games use DirectX. DirectX does not work on Linux. There's no like, there's nothing to say there. It's like we could say don't use. For context, DirectX is it's a slang used for programming to. Well, it essentially lets you do many things, but one thing that DirectX encompasses is Direct 3D, which lets you render 3D graphics, and it's for Windows only. And people prefer using that over OpenGL or Vulkan or whatever. And so it's just some people just prefer using DirectX, and it's like I'm not gonna like make you have a whole workflow. Everything is a workflow just to support this very relatively niche platform. As well, it's like okay, so you do these non-code steps, and you're still gonna have random platform-dependent things. Like random platforms are gonna be crashing when other ones don't. They have varying issues, right? For like a 0.5% player base, they had to support a whole nother platform for like 3 people. It's kind of like I kind of get it. I kind of get why it's not supported. So, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of discussion in the thread if you guys want to check it out. There's like paragraphs and paragraphs. Sweet. All right. Well, you want to close out your segment?
Sure. Thanks for watching this segment of Argument with Reddit. Sorry if I rambled on for a little bit too long, but I had to say it at some point.
Someone's got to say it. Yeah.
If you enjoyed this episode, well, if you're watching live, stick around for the next one. Irving will be. He's hyped it up. He said it's potentially the best episode, best segment he'll ever do. So it's pretty big words.
Yeah, now I'm scared.
If you're watching a recorded version of this, then make sure you check out our channel, or I don't know, is it called a channel everywhere? I don't know. On let's say wherever platform you want, check our account, I guess, for the next upload, which will be Irving segment. So, yeah.
Sweet. Here we go.
Mixed Media Movies.
And we're back for our final segment of the night, which is hopefully a really good one. I have been hyping it up, then I've been looking at my notes, and I'm like, I'm going to mess this up. So hopefully I can actually pull this off, and it's going to be a good one if I can. But before we do that, we should reintroduce all of ourselves so that we are well acquainted with our audience right now. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. Oh,
Hello, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Yes, and today we've got a huge spectrum of topics to traverse. And if you really want to know what we're going to be covering, we're going to be talking about things like money, empire. We're going to be talking about resources, and all of this, that whole system of understanding, which it's very hard to distill because this understanding is like years of paying attention, years of learning about how economics works, how politics works, how a whole bunch of stuff works, right? So to distill this all down for you into one episode is going to be a challenge, but it might be quite entertaining, I think, because of how much we're going to be traversing. And by the end, I'm going to tell you why all the Hollywood movies suck. You know, why at the end of the day, from all of that, you get bad movies in your theater. And then the thing is, not only just why you get bad movies in your theater from all of that, why you get bad music, why you get bad games, and all kinds of stuff, why you get bad products in your house. You know, all kinds of things. It's all going to hopefully make sense. And the goal here is to shape your understanding of how everything interconnects so that when you complain, it's not just idle complaining into the void, right? Like you're like, wow, they just effed up the next whatever, you know, and destroyed everything. Like, hopefully this can give you an understanding as to why it happened, you know, because some of these things seem so random. You're like, why are they shooting themselves in the foot over and over again? Why did Elemental do so bad in the theaters? I mean, I don't know the answer to that. It might be related, it might not be, but, you know, you have a better understanding about how everything interlocks. And when you have that, you're better equipped to advocate for yourself as a consumer and hopefully better choose what you consume. So yeah, that's the pitch as to what we're going to be going over. So where do we start? I thought about this question quite a bit the other day, is where do I begin with this discussion? And I think the discussion properly belongs with money first. And the reason why money is important first is because these the distributors of art, of the entertainment that we love, and etc., the distributors, they're ultimately companies, right? You know, we don't have like large non-profit you know, that's not a thing, right? Like, all these entities are for-profit entities at the end of the day who are distributing our movies, our games, etc., etc. And I think in order to start with that question, we have to ask ourselves, what is money, right? So money is a common unit of exchange. I'm not going to get into detail on any of this. So if you really want to have a high-level understanding of any of this, you got to take this as like a directory of topics to go look deeply into if you'd like. And we've gotten into some detail on some of these topics on episodes past, so definitely go check those out. But the core of what is money is very complicated because there's a lot of theories of money, and some of them are more intelligent than others. Put it that way. Some of them have more arguments to be made about them than others. The one that I'll give you, the definition I'll give you for now, so that we can understand each other, is a common unit of exchange, right? So something that is considered to be a common unit of exchange. So, for example, in the United States, that would be the US dollar. So it's a common unit of common because everyone uses it, and you can exchange it for other things, right? Like that's the basic definition I'll give you. So was gold at one point in the United States a common unit of exchange? I mean, yeah, by proxy at least, you know. So yes, so you could even go to say that crypto outside of the fiat system might become a common unit of exchange. I would not call it a common unit of exchange. Currently, it's not common enough, right, to be called money in the sense that I mean right now, right? Okay. So, what is today's money? Today's money is a bunch of numbers in a spreadsheet. And the funny thing you'll figure out if you study this in more detail, it's literally a spreadsheet. Like, like no lie, like literally, I don't know if it's an Excel sheet or if there's some proprietary government, spreadsheet software, but there's literally a ledger, and this ledger is literally a spreadsheet that contains all the financial information about the U.S. dollar. That is modern money. And then there's something crazy called modern money theory, which I will not get into right now, but it's, I'll put it shortly, it is very stupid. But a lot of people in today's day believe in modern monetary theory, and I might go into that in some future episode. But for now, all you have to know is that money can be printed. I think we all know that, which means that money can be, in essence, created. So have we violated the definition of money in saying that money can be created? No, because the resulting money is still circulated as a common unit of exchange, right? So printing money doesn't necessarily unmoney it, which is some arguments that some people make. Okay, the third thing that you need to know about money is that it comes from the money that we print ultimately has to come from somewhere to fit the United States' monetary theory. Meaning, the U.S. Does not believe that it is proper to just simply add dollars to the ledger on the the God table of all numbers that need to be known that the Fed has. It does not think that we should just add numbers on one side of the equation to say we now have this many dollars in circulation, right? It does not think that is a good idea. So instead, it has to find the dollars from somewhere. And there we get three concepts. One, it gets the dollars from foreign countries, which is the one we often talk about, which is very overplayed and underplayed at the same time. Basically, what I mean is we talk about it for the wrong reasons, basically. So we borrow money from other countries in order to print dollars. Make it, it'll make sense, hopefully, as we go on. So we borrow dollars from other countries. We borrow from domestic companies. So meaning there are companies, like company XYZ has a portion of U.S. debt. One of the biggest sectors of the economy that owns U.S. debt is insurance companies. They own some absurd 90 or 80% of U.S. debt, and these insurance companies tend to be the ones that are over 150 years old, right? Because that's how they got into that position to begin with. So these are your Northwest Mutuals. Anything with a mutual in the name probably is owning tons, billions and billions of dollars of U.S. debt. Is these insurance companies. And you might ask yourself, how'd that happen? Well, if the U.S. government is just man, we're strapped for cash, we need some dollars, who always has a lot of dollars on hand? Insurance companies, right? Right? They always hold dollars because that's how they pay out, right? So they have to hold a high cash base, right? So that's the history of why insurance companies ended up taking a lot of the U.S. debt. And the third is this concept called debt against the people. Which is basically saying that they're borrowing from you. So, you might say, well, I didn't lend them. I didn't lend them anything. Nothing came out of my wallet. Well, there's two ways debt from the people occurs. One is through treasury bonds, right? So, people buying bonds, you're buying the debt of the U.S. government, expecting some rate of return based off of the APR of said bond, the interest that bond yields, right? Or it is just the concept, the higher level concept of debt against the people, which is just they are saying that they owe you some amount of dollars. I owe you, the public. You know what I mean? I owe you X amount of dollars. Does that make sense? Or maybe it doesn't make sense because it really doesn't make sense fundamentally. But does that make sense as to how things happened or how things are laid out? Okay. So it's about a third each, by the way, which is the shocking thing. So a third of the debt is held by foreign countries, a third of the debt is held basically by insurance companies, and a third of the debt is held by the people, right? So a third, a third, a third. I think we imagine that 2/3 of our debt actually is held in foreign companies, or countries rather, because we talk about it so much, right? But actually, it's only a third. So a third, a third, a third. And then we'll come back to why these things are important in a moment. But the main takeaway from that is that the money isn't technically created out of thin air, but some of it kind of is if you just unthink about the underlying structure, right? It's almost like a mental game, right? And this is kind of what modern monetary theory is built off of, which, again, can't really get into right now. Okay, so the question that you're probably asking is, well, who issues the debt? Like, how does this even work? Like, there's got to be like a printing press somewhere, or like someone who's got control of the spreadsheet. You know, who's punching the numbers? Well, there's this entity called the Fed, and we've talked about it in detail in a prior episode on bank failures. You got to check that out in the description if you want more detail. But the particular reason of the Fed wasn't really to handle the money supply in debt, because it's called the Federal Reserve. That's the full name of the Fed, the Federal Reserve. The operative word being reserve. The purpose of the reserve is to be the last place where dollars can always be found. Right. Like, they had a ton of... The point is for them to have tons of dollars that they just hold. And you might ask, why would you want that? Well, there was a lot of bank failures in U.S. history that were quite painful to the public. And so what the politicians came up with is the idea of the Fed, where they would have a pile of cash that banks could always dip into for cheap, basically. So they would always have this vault full of cash. If they're getting a bank run against them, if you don't know what a bank run is, you got to check out that episode. If they're getting a bank run against them, they could always borrow some money from the Fed to hopefully stem the tide, stem the flow of the bank run at a very, very low interest rate, like practically zero, right? That's the Fed. That's the original conception of the Fed, rather. Now, there's this really complicated thing called the Eurodollar crisis that I really can't get into. It's actually like the most mind-changing thing. I learned about the Eurodollar crisis and Eurodollars in general rather recently. It changed my mind on a ton of stuff, like really eye-opening understanding stuff. So I would recommend, if you really want to know about the Eurodollar, you got to check out Jeff Snyder. He has a YouTube channel, and you could check out Tom Luongo, who also has a YouTube channel and a podcast. So you can check those guys out. They do awesome stuff. They actually oppose each other on some major opinions, but the core concept of the Eurodollar is you can find from those sources, and I highly, highly recommend you go check them out. But there's something that happened basically in the 80s and 90s called the Eurodollar crisis. And the point of the Fed basically changed from then on, which is they stopped becoming a last stop where the banks would dip in their toes in case they needed more money, and they became, instead of a reserve, they became effectively a bank to the foreign countries, specifically. So not necessarily, not the way you have to think about this is it's not that they're becoming a national bank for the United States. They basically became a national bank of the world minus the United States. Does that make sense? No? Okay. Okay, how does that happen? A lot of countries want US dollars. And actually, let's just move on from the concept of the Eurodollar for a moment, and then we'll kind of come back, and I think it'll make a little bit more sense. But the domestic side of how we get a national banking structure. So if you don't know, a lot of countries have national banks. Most countries by far have national banks, and they are ultimately the government's way of issuing debt, right? So it's government issued debt, it's government controlled policy over debt. In the United States, we don't have that direct system of government issued debt, right? So we don't have a last stop where all the debt comes from. We have a last stop of the reserve for where the debt can be hopefully the bleeding from the debt can hopefully be stopped in the Federal Reserve. Okay. The alternate system that has come about is something that happened post-2008, which has effectively created a national banking structure, which is called a systemically important financial institution, which you probably heard in the news lately because of bank failures. A systemically important financial institution is one that cannot fail. That's basically the definition. So what has the government done? It's basically said, look, there are certain banks by their size whose implosion would cause such catastrophic failure, at least this is the opinion of those who are for it, cause such catastrophic failure that we could not let them fail. And because we cannot let them fail, that means that we will always bail them out. If you remember, in the 2008 crisis, there was what was the bank the really famous bank that failed? Oh my gosh,
I don't know what it's called.
On the tip of my tongue. Sorry, sometimes things I just forget them. But yeah, so we had a huge bank failure. Incidentally, even inflation adjusted, our bank failures right now are way higher than our bank failures collectively were back in 2008, and that should concern you. But the systemically important banks include banks like J.P. Morgan, right? Include banks like what's it called? Oh my gosh. Bank of America. I was like, America. Yeah, Bank of America, et cetera, et cetera. So these are gigantic banks, right? And these banks are systemically important because if they were to fail, the whole debt structure of our country would collapse, basically. And that is true. Whether or not we should have systemically important banks is a separate issue. But what does that do you think, to the national banking situation? It effectively melts those companies into the government, and it doesn't look so on the at the face. It doesn't look like it at its face because they don't pitch it to you as like a government takeover of these 4 banks, right, or 4 or 5 banks, whatever it is, right? It's not that. It's just that in the case that they were to fail, we have the tools to help them, right? That's the pitch, right? What ends up actually happening is that those banks effectively merger with the government. Why? It's because in order for those banks because they have that status, they become highly regulated, meaning that they have a lot more rules placed on them than a normal bank. This was pitched as a give and take, right? Like, oh yeah, we give the banks this backstop, but then we take away from them some freedom, right? That's like the base argument being made for that legislation. That's not practically what happens, and I think anyone in legislation should know that's not the practical effect. And so I'm not going to be naive and think that that was the intended actual practical effect. The intended actual practical effect is that the government ends up being so involved in the banking structure at the level of those really high asset banks that they end up having to listen to the, I guess, signals of the government to make sure they don't get overregulated in certain ways, right? The political signals. So these are the banks trying to appease the government so they don't end up getting overregulated. They don't end up getting over-investigated, right? They don't want to be hit with some gigantic lawsuit. They don't want to pay billions and billions of dollars in fines, right? This would take away from the executive's paycheck by a few $1 million, right? That's not good. So ultimately, it melts the government and these banks. It goes both ways, though, because the banks being so regulated desire now to control the regulator way more, right? So the banks, who are now being grabbed at by the government, want to grab back, right? So that they can control their means of regulation, right? And this happens. This happens all the time. If you ever look at charts of Fed chairmen and where they come from, a lot of them come from the banking system. So our current guy, what's his face, Powell, he comes from J.P. Morgan, right? From a J.P. Morgan background. So that sort of melting of these two infrastructures effectively creates a national banking system without it being explicit, right? Without it being explicit. Okay. That's important, and we'll come back to it. Okay, so we know the Fed, to recap that a little bit. The Fed is the bank of the world, and our systemically important banks are the bank of our country, right? Those are our national banks, basically. Now we go on to empire. We need to talk about empire before we sort of sew some ideas together. So, let me burst some bubbles out there. I don't know how many bubbles I actually am bursting, because I think we've kind of come to terms with this, at least some of us. The United States is an empire. It's been an empire for a long time now. We don't like that word because I guess we're democracy loving something, right? But no, we are an empire. We've been an empire since World War II ended. At the very least, very least, some argue that we've been an empire since invading the Philippines, and I think that's a bit of an interesting area to talk about, but not one for this episode. What we can say for sure is that post-World War II United States is an empire. And one thing that you need to know about the history of empires is that there's something called the rule of resources. What's the rule of resources? The rule of resources says that the buyers dictate the policy of the resource producer. This is invariable in history. Empires are typically not the primary producer of the resource. When we're talking about resources, we're talking about things like gold, oil, silver, copper. Like, we're talking about these types of things. We're also talking about, maybe some basic commodities, like some basic textiles. Like, we're talking about stuff like this, right? Maybe grain, right? Stuff like this. These are resources. So the rule of resources is that the resource buyers dictate the policy of said resource in the country, right, that is producing the resource. And this will come back to Disney eventually, I promise. So why is this important? This is important because the United States post-World War II is basically the only country wealthy enough in the whole world post-World War II because of the particular events of, Europe getting smashed up by the war and the East getting smashed up by the war. And so basically we were the best man standing, left, right? That leaves us particularly wealthy in relation to the world, which creates a gigantic buyer, right? So we're like the only guys with the money going around being like, I would like to buy your oil, I would like to buy your blah, 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 right? And this is coming from individuals and companies within the United States, which means that now we can dictate policy because of this rule of resources in the countries that we get those resources from. The exacerbating factor is that the U.S. had a crazy powerful industrial base post-World War II that was created by the military-industrial complex, basically. So we had a bunch of factories that ended up being turned into other things. We had a bunch of souped-up automobile companies that just came from government contracts that were doing a bunch of stuff. We're talking about like the GEs, the Fords, the billion companies that come out of this, like being mega companies, right? They're the only mega companies that are healthy in the whole world. So they buy everything, right? Because they're the ones who are manufacturing, right? So, thus, the United States dictates everything. The last thing that exacerbates this is that the collapse of the Soviet Union completed a unipolar economic hegemony, basically. So basically, it made it so that the United States was the only country that could have economic hegemony in the whole world. And we kind of laughed as they crumbled in the 90s, which is a whole story for another day. The 90s in Russia, if you don't know, is a huge topic and very bad, lots of suffering. But let's see here. So that's important because once we lose our major competitor to collapse, we become literally the only guy now. Like, literally the only guy who's walking around buying up all the resources. Okay. Now, resource producers essentially become vassal states of the empire, right? So, and you just have to look at a map if you want to figure out what ends up being a vassal state. Look at where, you don't have to know where the resources are, just look at where the choke points are geographically on a map. And that will tell you where all the important vassal states have to be. So
I know from Hearts of Iron, the key what do you call it? The key straits are the Suez Canal and Gibraltar.
Yeah. yes, exactly. Those are on my list. But some other ones are the Black Sea, the Panama Canal, the East China Sea.
The Panama Canal did not exist at the time Hearts of Iron took place, so that's why I didn't say that one.
Yes. The Strait of Hormuz, and so on and so forth. These are channels in which resources have to go from the vassal states to the empire, but the vassal states, if they cannot get it to the empire gets mad, right? So the empire then has to effectively intervene in order to allow the channels to flow. So it's not just the resources, the resource flow has to be protected. The U.S. Navy, being historically powerful for so many reasons, I mean, just look at a map again. Just look at how we're situated in the world and you would understand why the U.S. Navy has to be so powerful. But the U.S. Navy ends up being the maritime police of the whole world, right? Ensuring that these channels are flowing, right? And what is the exchange for doing so? Because what ends up happening is, okay, let's put it this way. You're in the United States, you're policing the Strait of Hormuz, right? But you're not the only one who's buying the oil that's coming through there, right? There are other countries that are buying oil that's coming through there, right? So why should you put up all the cost, right, to keeping the channel open, right? I mean, you're only the empire, but maybe some other countries who also buy the oil should share in the costs. Well, do they pay us some sort of rent for policing the Strait of Hormuz? No, of course not. So what do we do in exchange? We say that you must buy the oil in U.S. dollars. So now we're connecting some ideas here. So the oil, or whatever resource that's coming through these U.S. protected streams, must be bought in U.S. dollars, which effectively makes international trade work only in U.S. dollars.
I'm very curious how this is going to potentially connect to Elemental, whatever it's called, being bad.
These U.S. dollars effectively make the Fed the world's bank, and that's hopefully the connection that you needed, because those U.S. dollars are printed. The debt basically handled by those dollars are handled by the Fed ultimately, right? As the arbiter of who gets to have debt that's printed out of U.S. dollars in order to pay for things abroad. So they become the default bank of the U.S. dollar. Okay. Let's see here. So now, the petrodollar is, which is what the dollar used to buy everything internationally is called. The petrodollar ends up being created for hegemony, which hegemony just means for the purposes of control over external forces, right? So it ends up being a tool, at least in the minds of certain personnel, a tool for controlling other countries, because if your country has to have tons of dollars in order to trade internationally, then the price of that dollar is going to dictate a lot about your economy. Does that make sense? So if China has to hold $100 billion in US dollars in order to make up its trade internationally, that's a lot of money. That money can affect your whole economy. So if the US prints more money and inflates the dollar, it'll affect the Chinese economy overall. If the US stops giving out dollars, right, to said countries, it will hurt that country, right? It becomes a tool of force, right? And it becomes a tool for a lot of other things, as we'll see later. But we're going to fast forward just a little bit back to the 80s and 90s, where we were saying the Eurodollar crisis happened and the Fed becomes the World's Bank, rather. There's something called the World Bank. That's not a map. The World's Bank. And what does the U.S. simultaneously do? The U.S. simultaneously sells out its industrial base to foreign countries. And this is a very, very important thing to understand. That we willfully gave up our industrial base to other countries. It's something hard for us to imagine at our age because we can't remember the industrial powerhouse of the United States. That's not something that we think about when we think about the United States. But the United States used to produce and export tons and tons of goods to the entire world, as empires do, right? So this makes complete sense. I mean, if you want to see a great example of this, just look at the British Empire right before us. I mean, it's a great example of the same exact concept. The same exact steps, everything happens the same exact way. But we sell out our industrial base through a lot of different complicated means that I'm not going to explain. There's a lot of politics involved, but we end up selling out our industrial base to other countries. What is the argument made? It's made that capitalism needs to be even more liberated, effectively, right? Like, we need to have more free flow of goods external to our borders in the external economy, and that will create a more efficient system. And prices will decrease. So we'll be even wealthier because of our buying power will just go up so much because everything that's made externally is so much cheaper than what's made internally. Well, that also hollows out your industrial base because then your internal companies cannot make money and then they get flushed out, right? Okay. If you want a good example of this, think of chip manufacturing. All of them are outside the United States, even though it's like probably one of the biggest choke point fields in the entire world. So, there you go. What else does an empire do? It exports culture. It exports culture. So, again, look at the British Empire if you want to convince yourself of that. Look at India, look at other places during, well, half the world, frankly. If you want to look at the British Empire and its impacts on the whole world. Well, the United States does the same thing. I mean, I think that's rather obvious. That it ends up exporting its culture quite wide and far. And that includes things like movies. So movies have made an appearance for a moment here. So things like movies, music, gaming, depending on how far along we are in the story, these things get exported en masse to the world, and the world eats it up. And it's not just, I mean, it's two things, right? It's like the organic sense of, like, you know, people pay attention to us because we're big. And because we're very wealthy, we produce artists who are able to thrive, and et cetera, and people like that, and then they want to emulate it, and et cetera. So there's an organic path there. Then there's an inorganic path, which is way more complicated, which is that some of that's induced in order to make the external countries more like the empire, which is, again, common to empires. It makes it so that those countries are always easier to manage, especially if their social fabric expectations are similar to that of your country. So if I Americanize some foreign country, the people of said foreign country view the litmus test as to whether the country is good or not by how similar it is to the United States. Does that make sense? So it becomes easier to manage the populace of said foreign country by doing so. So there's two ends of that. And that's why you get propaganda movies and you get great classics. So there you go. So there's that. Okay. Now, what does dollar hegemony do for us? It also helps us to have debt at no interest, which means that, so for example, if China has 100 billion US dollars, right, and we want to borrow half of that, right, because they have that 100 billion US dollars because they need to trade, right, so we want to borrow half of that, and we say, we'll pay you 3% interest, right, so why would China take this? Well, China takes this because this fights US dollar inflation, right, to take that 3% deal. They're like, okay, cool. At least we get to stabilize our our stockpile of US dollars to make sure it doesn't devalue, because the rate of return is the same as the inflation on the US dollar, about 3%, right? Why would the US government do this? Well, because its budget is completely mismatched. So its spending budget is way higher than the money it takes in. So it has to find a way to pay those bills off, and a third of that pie is going to be borrowing from other countries. That 3%, though, is free from our perspective. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because that 3% matches inflation. So there's no... The loan ends up being 3% inflation minus 3% interest, which equals 0. So we get to borrow for free. This is one of the things that dollar hegemony does for us, is allows us to borrow money for free, right? So why we covered that section, let's go back over it real quick, is because empire and dollar hegemony allow the US government to borrow money for 0% APR. That's why we covered that whole thing, okay? Now, what happens when inflation is higher? Debt in general is easier to pay off, right? So let's say I, personally, just me, take a 10% loan, a loan with 10% on it, but inflation this year is really high at 8%. Oh my gosh, right? What is my effective loan interest? Question for the class.
I've been put on the spot.
All right, what were our numbers again? Sorry.
10% interest on the loan and 8% inflation.
2%, right?
2%, simple, right? So any banker does this math, and they, or any borrower does this math, and they know what their effective interest is. So debt never looks as bad as it is on paper. You know, it was very easy for me to get pre-pandemic a 10%, maybe 12% business loan, right? But then if inflation's like 3-4%, that's like more like 8%. You know, that's not so bad, you know? Inflation helps you in times of debt. It also helps the government in times of debt. So when the government is in debt, inflation is good for it, right? Because it can pay down, it can actually potentially profit off of the debt that it took in, right? Because if it's giving that debt out for 3% to China, right? And inflation this year is 8%, their loan is much easier to pay, -5%. It pays itself, like almost literally, right? I mean, literally. So that is our debt system. What the euro-dollar crisis does, and what the dollar hegemony does, and what the creation of the US empire does, especially post-fall of the Soviet Union, what this all does is create a debt-driven economy. Does that make sense? Debt becomes cheap. Dirt cheap. Meaning every single company within the United States can borrow so much more efficiently than any company outside the United States ever could dream of. That gives them competitive advantage as well. Go ahead.
This is why, like, every company can run like at like the biggest loss.
Oh, we're getting there. But you see, this is important to understand why it happened. Or else, if you're complaining, oh my gosh, everything's debt driven, you don't have no idea why, right? like you still don't know what to say. You just still don't know what the mechanisms are that cause that, right? Your complaining is useless. So this creates the debt-driven economy of today, and it keeps getting worse. It keeps getting worse over time as soft monetary policy continues to be okay with higher amounts of inflation, right? Why are they okay with it? Well, let's go up the signal chain real quick. So let's say you are Disney, for example. I mean, you can see how much I like Disney. But let's take Disney, for example. Or maybe it's a bad example because they're an old company. So let's take Netflix, actually. That's probably a better example. Much newer company, part of that sort of FANG revolution, which is more to like the debt revolution, is the basic way you can summarize that. But Netflix borrows money from banks. Some medium-sized regional banks like SVB. Medium-sized, I mean, that thing is massive, so maybe that's a misnomer. But compared to JP Morgan, they're much smaller. But JP Morgan is also like gigantic. So SVB, right? They're borrowing money from SVB, but they're also borrowing money from JP Morgan. They're borrowing money from Bank of America. They're also borrowing money from their local credit union. They're borrowing money from everywhere, right? Netflix. That borrowed money effectively is policed monetarily by our effective national banks that cannot fail. Our systemically important financial institutions. So JP Morgan, yeah, it's making decisions whether to give Netflix a loan, but some of those decisions are influenced by government interests. You understand? So, like, behind the scenes, government official says, you know, Netflix, they're great because they're going to develop our internet infrastructure, which is great for this military objective. I don't know, just whatever excuse you want to make up. Netflix is probably not a great example of this. A better example would be like Google or Facebook or Amazon. All of those for government co-interest on whether they get loans or not. You see? Now, why is JP Morgan willing to take loans that are way high compared to what they would give as a ratio of income to some smaller entity like me, my company? Well, it's because they can't fail. So what's the point of JP Morgan arguing like with the government interests? There's no point, right? There's literally no point in arguing, right? So you know, who cares? I mean, it doesn't, from a financial perspective, it makes sense anyway, because those companies can get large enough that they effectively also become systemically important. Now here, Disney is a better example. Disney employs literally, I don't know, like millions of people. Maybe that's exaggerating. Maybe hundreds of thousands of people. Disney employee count.
It's definitely consider like Disney people making like obviously movies and shows, then Disney World and all their properties and like all the toy makers and whatever, you know. So we have a lot of people.
Yeah, 220,000. 220,000.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So Disney has 220,000 jobs under their belt. What do politicians like to talk about the most in terms of economy? Whether or not you can get a job, which is a whole topic for another day, but it's for another day. What do they not want to see under their administrations? They don't want to see job loss, right? So what ends up happening is Disney, by proxy of JP Morgan being systemically important, and yes, not all their loans come from JP Morgan, but all loans come from JP Morgan, if you get what I mean. Like, effectively, the small banks are borrowing also from JP Morgan to give Disney the extra loans, right? So what ends up effectively happening is that Disney becomes systemically important. Do you understand what I'm saying? That means that
Disney fails and they can't pay off the other systemically important things or whatever.
That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it, though, is that JP Morgan will just make the argument to the public, well, we're going to give them another loan because it's Disney and they're reputable, and so we're going to give them another loan in their time of hardship so that they don't have to lay off so many employees. When the financials might tell them that that's actually not a smart idea. Do you understand? Like the actual core fundamentals aren't actually there. You see? So essentially, JP Morgan is setting bailout policy without being a government entity. Yes, they have to pay back the loan, but paying back the loan is easy compared to bankruptcy, right? Like, going bankrupt is way worse, right? Okay. So that's what ends up happening to U.S. companies, is they become debt-driven. Our whole economy becomes debt-driven because of empire, dollar hegemony, and the Fed. Now, recently there's been this trend of, so how do you typically get debt? You qualify for debt based off of your income, your assets, and your creditworthiness. Creditworthiness being your history of paying things off on time, right? Basically, right? And that makes sense, right? If you're lending someone money, you want them to have those three attributes. Those three attributes don't really matter when you're so large as Disney, because you'll always get the loan because you're Disney. What may matter, though, is a social governance thing that is happening more lately. There's a few companies that issue creditworthiness and also lend money not based as much on the financials, but on social policy. And if you've heard this three-letter term, it's called ESG, right? ESG.
It sounds very familiar.
It's like a talking point as of late. It's been happening forever though. So, ESG. What does it stand for?
It's like effective social something, or like am I?
No, it's like.
Oh, this sounds very not economically sound. But...
Well, it's not. It's called it stands for environmental, social, and governance. So the three things that these companies are caring about in terms of creditworthiness, right? So they're saying that it's risky to the credit holders for people to have bad social policy, which is kind of bizarre. But why is that able to happen? It's able to happen because all debt is backstopped by the government, effectively. So, like, the means of assessing whether someone's creditworthy start to matter less and less and less because loans are always payable, right? At the end of the day, who's going to pay for it? The taxpayer, right? That's just how this works. We backstop our entire debt-driven company with our tax dollars. Or debt against us, right? A third of it, at least, right? That's what's happening. Or a third to those insurance companies, which also have their own interests, right? And if you have a third of U.S. debt, I mean, like, you know, you kind of have a lot of say and control over U.S. policy, right? That's why they have such great they're great tax havens. Highly recommend, by the way. Might as well take advantage of it while it exists. Is to use insurance companies as a tax haven. You can do that. You don't have to be rich to do that. You could do that just as an average Joe. Most people don't know that. It's complicated. Like you have to work it out with someone. So not financial advice. Hashtag. It's because of our free debt society that we're able to have these sorts of things occur. Now, companies that rely on the system, I will use the term, it's not a real term, I'll use the term, a zombie company. I was mentioning it last week when we were talking about Roblox. Zombie companies rely entirely on the debt structure of the United States to function. So what are the hallmarks of a zombie company? It's one whose business model effectively is debt. They don't say that publicly, but their business model is effectively, we will always have more money to borrow next month. That's effectively their business model. It's one whose only concern is meeting executive pay, right? So think about it this way. If you could borrow $1 billion and your operating expenses are $800 million, and you can pay your executives $100 million, and the rest of the $100 million is reinvested into the company, or paying down prior debt, maybe that's probably more appropriate in this example, because that's your only monthly debt bill, right? Then, I mean, what's the problem? Everyone's getting paid, you know what I mean? Like just because you're debt-driven doesn't mean people aren't getting paid. You're just paying people using the debt. So the Disney execs, the Netflix execs, Disney's a bad example of this, generally speaking, because it's so old. But Netflix is a much better example. So the Netflix CEO is being paid by debt. His high salary is being paid by debt. That's what's happening, and they can do that because they'll always have more debt next month coming down the pipe. Zombie companies also need backstopping when they are big. So what their goal is not to become economically efficient and provide a good product. It's not capitalism. Their goal is to become systemically important. That's the goal. Is to get large enough that their failure is guaranteed to be backstopped by the banks, and which ultimately means backstopped by the government, right? So Netflix is not there yet. I will say that. It's like maybe like, you know, kind of halfway there, maybe. Disney is certainly there, though. Certainly there. Apple, certainly there. Microsoft, certainly there. You know, they're effectively systemically important. They're not going to fail. And then how do these zombie companies make money, though? Well, they need debt, so they need to have a high ESG score. They make more money when inflation is higher. And here's a really important one for some of these companies is government contracts. So this applies mostly to Amazon, Microsoft, Google, IBM, those sorts of companies. Some of them are a little bit older than the full-on debt revolution. And what these companies can do is melt themselves with the government through contract. So now, let's say the whole U.S. military is running off of AWS, which is almost practically true. Can you imagine the power that you have as Amazon?
Yeah. So where I work at a defense contractor, we use AWS. I just thought that's kind of strange.
Well, there you go. I used to work at the same exact company, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So you know, when the whole military becomes dependent on you, basically, right? Then you kind of get a lot of staying power. You get a lot of policy power. You get a lot of power in general. I mean, yeah, Amazon's not the only cloud provider. The other one's Microsoft. You know what I mean? Like, it's like...
And Google Cloud as well.
Exactly.
Well, I will say, you know, I mean, as a Linode user myself, I've used Google Cloud as well. Linode is way more user-friendly in my opinion. But, yeah, I mean, whatever.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's cheaper as well, but I could be wrong about that.
So remember that Google, I had that episode on how freeware is destroying art, which is highly related to this this topic, and you should go check that one out. Google started out being a In-Q-Tel funded project. If you don't know what In-Q-Tel is, it's the CIA investing front. Just go look it up on Wikipedia. It's open knowledge. There's no it's not clandestine anymore. In-Q-Tel is the CIA's investing front. They have billions of dollars for free, which comes from debt again, right? You see how debt is everything, right? Like the money that the CIA has to give to some nerds who want to become rich, you know, for their technology, is coming from your pocket, effectively. Inflation is a tax, right? Well, that's something we should really understand. Inflation is a tax. It's a automatic tax that comes from the prices that you pay. That's effectively what's going on, right? So Google's started out as a satellite, sorry, not Google. I messed that whole thing up. It's not Google. It's a company, I can't remember its name, that got absorbed into Google.
Keyhole Incorporated.
What is it?
Keyhole Incorporated.
Keyhole Incorporated. Okay, there you go. Keyhole was a company that got invested by In-Q-Tel, and it was doing mapping via satellite. And that's very interesting to the government. It wants that. So the CIA says, here's a ton of money. Now, you might ask, why didn't the government just give them that money? Well, it's because they want to use it for other things as well, right? Like, it's not just, you know, they don't want to just use it for general military mapping. They want to use it for intelligence purposes as well. So the intelligence agencies got to control the flow. So, that company ends up being absorbed by Google later on. You know, there are plenty of companies. Any recognizable brand ends up having some sort of government contract, technology brand in particular. So NVIDIA, I think even AMD, et cetera, et cetera. Now, with all this fraternizing between the government and these these companies, what is going on is the same thing that happens with the banks. Melting. They melt together, right? They start to melt together. And this produces a concept called administrative capture. You can also look that up. It's a very common a commonly known concept. Administrative capture is the idea that the regulatory bodies end up being owned by the companies being regulated. And the thing is, this is a two-way street. You know, like they end up like you go work for the government, then you go get a job at some company in that same field. Because of your work in the government, they think that you'll be able to push paper easier through the government. Then you come from the private sector, then you go back into the government where you use your connections to get things done. That's the melting that happens between the companies and the government. And that's administrative capture. And there's antitrust collusion. And this dates back to when the antitrust laws were written to begin with. Judges were often bribed. Back then, it was actually a lot more on the nose because, unfortunately, the internet didn't exist. It was much harder to spread the word of certain allegations, if you get what I mean. So it was much more on the nose when judges were bribed. But there's one rule when you look at old cases, antitrust cases. The railroad always wins. That's the rule. If it's an antitrust case, the railroad wins. You know, that's pretty much the rules. Now, I will say the antitrust laws were written really terribly. So on the flip side, it's not like we had the most beautiful legislation in place that would control the trust busting environment. But it's not just that. It's also capture of the judicial system via these companies. Okay, my battery has died apparently on my camera. So let's see. I'm gonna pause here because this ends up going to the second half of things. If you guys can talk amongst yourself, I'll be right back.
I'm wondering if we can guess how he generated that what do you call it, the thumbnail for this video. It's quite horrifying. Maybe Mickey Mouse in the apocalypse? Survive? Mickey Mouse? I don't know. The background could be many things, I feel like. Oh, you're muted. Oh, hello?
Oh, I said I guess I had to pull it up, see if I can see what it looks like.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'm back. Well, my camera's not back. I'll fix that in a second. But let's see here. General change. Okay. So here we are. I'm back. Okay. And you guys in the chat, if you're curious as to what the prompt was that generated this in Midjourney, just give us some guesses in the comments for sure. So where was I? So now let's transition to how this has affected the overall economy of art and entertainment, which is where this conversation was headed to, right? And I need to draw on the live whiteboard in order to make sure things are clear enough. I used a ball as an example last week when I was talking about Roblox, and I think that's a very appropriate analogy because also it's easy to draw. So there's a concept that I will call shrinking the ball. So here's what happens. Because we have companies that are debt-driven, let's take Netflix. Netflix is a great example, so we're just going to keep rocking with it. So we have Netflix over here. It's a happy little company. It's founded to send Blu-rays to people, not stream. And that's quite the sensible goal, and probably all their pricing was very sensible and commensurate to the material cost of sending people Blu-rays, right? Probably. But Netflix realizes something. It realizes that daddy government over here with its son, the banks, will give Netflix infinite money via the debt-driven system, right? And Netflix goes, because of this, we could pursue any goal we want so long as we can just pay off our minimum payment every month, right? So long as we can do that, we can pursue any idea that we want. And let's say something real quick. It's not nefarious in Netflix's case. Netflix is too old for it to be the same sort of cancerous organization, at least at the jump, right, than some of the newer ones who are just there just to provide like vaporware, if you get what I mean. Netflix is actually trying a new business model. And it says, what if the internet allows us to stream directly to your device? This streaming service is our ball. There's our ball there. Maybe I shouldn't have drawn a circle around the other ones. Maybe it's confusing, but I think I'd delete that easily. But, oh, not easily. I thought the whole line was going to go away. Well, that's unfortunate. Okay, good enough. But what will end up happening, or this ball will call the product, right? So this is what Netflix's primary product is. And in this case, the ball is streaming. So it's streaming. The reason we're using this ball analogy to begin with is because it doesn't matter what this is. You can substitute the ball with practically anything, right? The ball, they're going to sell this ball for $1. Now, we happen to know exactly what this ball is worth because we have movies already, right? Like we have movies and TV shows coming out on TV. We have these things being sold in stores and in movie theaters. Let's just say, for the sake of example, it's not based off of any real number, that the real ball, the same exact size ball, actually is worth $10. The ratios in real life might be worse, by the way. Way worse, actually. So Netflix might be selling something that's worth 20 times more than what they sell it for, effectively. How are they able to do this? Well, they're able to do this because they're able to sell that ball at a $9 loss because they always have debt behind them. And the reason an older company like Netflix does this is because they want to see if the product is viable. They're not trying to... they don't know that it's not going to be viable because they're stupid. They're just not competent, right? That's the reality of it. But in a not debt-driven society, the incompetency gets killed by capitalism. You understand? Like, the incompetency will become inefficiency, and your business will just fail. In this case, because we have infinite money to borrow, our incompetency doesn't become apparent to us ever. Because we always survive. Like, next month we're still here. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, we're still here. Like, you know, it's all good. You know? So they're like, okay, we're going to send the way we're going to have people join streaming instead of go to the movie theater is we're going to say that we're going to give it to them for cheap so that we can do our experimenting and get this thing done. Right? Okay. Now they start selling these balls like crazy over time. Right? And eventually... they sell, I don't know, let's say 3 billion of them, right? So 3 billion subscribers on Netflix, right? And you might say, well, I mean, they're just prototyping, so eventually they raise the price of the ball, right? Well, the problem is...
You can't do that.
The problem is at the moment
I thought about that so many times for services like, oh, well, you know, I thought about that for like video games and stuff. It's like Steam discourages you from raising the price, even if it's like something that goes from like beta to, you know, something that's well, not in beta or whatever, right? It's like, well, the quality of the product has literally increased, right? That's what we're saying by this tag change, right? But for some reason, it is frowned upon to increase price ever. So,
yes. So the problem with this whole thing is that this ball over here, this $10 ball, actually has better service. Because they've hidden a lot of price cuts on this ball over here, right? They've used slightly less good materials, etc., etc. In our example, the movie theater is just nicer, right? You know, like, it's just a nicer experience. The Blu-ray looks better. especially I'm talking about early days Netflix in particular, right? The Blu-ray just looks straight up better, right? And people already have the player. DVDs at this time all themselves look better than streaming. So they can't raise it to $2, or also, the catalog's not even big enough, at this time. So what are they going to do? Like, they can't raise the price. It's a $1 ball. That's the best thing they can do, or else people are going to flock back to the $10 ball, right? So over time, Netflix can't compete because they're taking a $9 loss every month, or every one they sell. They can't compete with the $10 ball, which this company, let's say it's, Warner Brothers. This company, selling the $10 ball, is making like $5 off of every ball. It's, it's making money. It making money means that it can reinvest in itself. It has so much more leniency, if that didn't exist. You understand? So this company, Warner Brothers, looks a lot healthier than Netflix. So what Netflix has to do in order to try to meet profitability so they can post a profit is they have to shrink the ball. That's the concept. Remember this in your head. Shrink the ball. They must shrink the ball. They need to provide you less over time. This ball cannot be the same size as the other ball. It's way too expensive for them to do that. So they've got to shrink it over time. And how do they shrink the ball? Well, it depends on which ball you're talking about. Which is why a lot of these companies, you're like, well, this business model is not the same as this business model, but they're both zombie companies. How does that work? Well, it's because they're different balls. So it works differently in each case. So in the case of, let's say, Facebook, they went to market not profitable, then said we could make money via advertising because we have so many users on our platform, right? That we can make up the lack of profit margin with volume, right? And then they went to market and that doesn't work, right? They're still posting a loss. So what do they have to say in order to sound like a profitable company? They will have to say, okay, go ahead.
I was going to say joke. I was going to say metaverse.
No. What they have to say is, we're going to increase our margins, but not by making the platform cost more, because there's no way we could make anybody use this platform if they had to pay money for it, right? But instead, we're going to use data mining to shrink the ball. You see what I'm saying? So they're going to say, the ball's going to become more efficient. Well, the ball in this case is advertising, right? It's going to become more efficient because it'll appeal to users more directly. That's how they shrink the ball. Now, we've got the government and banks over here, but we missed one important player. That's Wall Street. These companies always go public. These zombie companies always go public. Why do they go public? Because they want to take advantage of the idiocy of the stock market and take advantage of the fact that stonks always go up. Why do stonks always go up, right? That meme. They always go up because inflation always happens. So long as inflation happens, people need to flee to an asset that will outperform inflation as much as humanly possible. It encourages speculation, right, to increase inflation. So they're like, hey, there's this ever-growing money pot called the stock market, right? And this ever-growing money pot called the stock market grabs money from the average person, their retirements and everything else, in increasing fashion, because inflation is always increasing, right? Excuse me. People would be fools not to put their money in the stock market. So let's grab a slice and go public, right? To go public, you have to make a convincing argument as to why people should invest in you in order for institutional money and private investors to come in and buy your stock. One thing you have to do is you have to always look like you're shrinking the ball. You have to. Or else your stock price is going to tank. Because, on paper, you are not profitable. You lose $9 every ball you sell. You can check the quarterly reports for Roblox, Facebook. I think Netflix is negative $2.7 billion last year. So,
That's a lot of debt.
yeah, exactly. So, I think Roblox is negative 162 million a quarter. So, these companies on paper don't make money. What is one of the points of investing in a stock is something called the dividend, right? Which is a profit sharing mechanism. Guess what you don't offer if you go public, if you're these companies? A dividend, because you can't pay that. How are you going to... It's going to cause your debt problem to go, like, exponentially, you know. There's a point at which, like, you actually can't borrow more, right? You know, reasonably speaking. So, you know, you have to not give that dividend away. So what ends up happening over time for these ghost companies, these zombie companies, is that their stock prices go like this, and their dividends go like this. But what do they borrow against? What asset? Remember, income, assets, and creditworthiness, right, are the three ways you get debt. Your stock value has now become an asset, right? So that exponential increase of your stock value helps you to get more debt. You see where this infinite money machine is coming from? Like, it's coming from everywhere, you know? Everything's enabling you to do this. And you're convincing your investors that one day we'll give you a dividend and it'll be great. It'll be the best dividend ever, you know? One day that will happen once we're profitable. Once we're profitable. 10 years later, still not profitable. But guess what? We grew our user base by 2x. You see what I'm saying? This becomes the perpetual argument that we've shrunk the ball more this year, and so there will be a year where the ball has shrunk enough that we'll make money. That is the perpetual argument. Okay. So other ways to shrink the ball are appeasing the government for more government dollars, right? The government can directly buy this ball for $3. You see? The government has no necessity to buy things at a reasonable price, unlike market pressures. And why can the government do such an inefficient thing? It can do it because it has an infinite money machine itself. So why not? You know. So if this is somehow beneficial to both parties, then the ball will be sold for $3 to the government. This happens with tech contracts where they overpromise. They don't overpromise to. They maybe some generals get fooled or whatever, but the brokers of the contract are not fooled, right? They know there's going to have to be another contract that comes down the line to fix the problems of the first contract. Again, I saw this in the industry because I worked at a defense contractor. People were keenly aware of the profit mechanism of how they make money there. So this comes firsthand as well. And it's not like it's not taboo. Like people are talking about this in the office. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, it's not this crazy secret. It's like, oh man, like we're not going to reach our target. No, that's how the conversation goes. The conversation goes, we're not going to reach our target, which means that maybe in our next contract we'll have an opportunity to lobby for this other thing. That's how it works.
Yeah, I've already seen that.
Exactly. So that ball gets sold for $3. Okay, you can destroy your opposition to create a vacuum. Amazon did this hardcore. How did Amazon destroy? So let's put it this way: this other ball, $10 ball, is still attractive to some people. So what is the best way to compete against the $10 ball when you're shrinking the ball? So as you shrink the ball, obviously your ball looks less good to the people who are paying attention. You know what I mean? So how do you steal more customers away from the $10 ball? You kill it. You eliminate the $10 ball so that you're the only ball in town. You see what I'm saying? So how do you do that? Well, if you're Amazon, what you do is you compete against your own listers by creating Amazon Basics. And you might say, okay, well, that's just another competitor in the field. How does that work? Well, how it works is two mechanisms. One, Amazon can create a loss-leading product easier because they have an infinite debt machine, whereas that mom-and-pop store that was making said product, let's say it's a broom, right? Broom made by Jackson and Sons, right? Like, selling on the Amazon store. Amazon makes a broom that competes with this, and it loses money because it's just sold for less money. It's a smaller ball. But they can do that for longer because Jackson and Sons cannot borrow as much as Amazon. So, if you have a $1 ball on the market and a $10 ball on the market, and they do this exact same thing, right? Well, a $1 ball loses Amazon money, but it eventually will just kill the $10 ball, right? Because there'll be so many months where Jackson and Sons are not getting payments. Does that make sense? That whole mechanism of competition through debt, right? It becomes who can get the debt easier. And the bigger company always gets the debt easier. So the bigger company always crushes the smaller one in a debt competition. The second way they did this was by literally cloning the design of their competitors. There's many lawsuits about this. Some of them they've lost, actually, so this is just judicial fact. That they've done this to different companies. They stole their product, design, copied it, and manufactured it for cheaper. Okay? Enslaving children. Here's a fun one. Here's how you shrink the ball a little bit more. This goes into Roblox maybe a little bit more. But children are much more persuadable, right? to get to buy a $1 ball that's shrunk. You say to the child, these are actually the same size. I'm not kidding, by the way. Like, if you don't think this is how it works, then you don't know how ruthless some people are. That small ball is the same as this one. And you're a child and you don't know the difference. So you're like, okay, that works for me. So you grow up loving this ball. You really love it, And by the time you're of spending age, you're 18, 19, 20, whatever, you are indoctrinated to love this ball. Right? How long is that investment? It's only like 10 years, 15 years. People don't think in short term, like normal people do. In the industry, they think long term, right? Very long. That's why they survive. So, why does Google sponsor a bunch of coding programs when I was in middle school? That's actually, I'll put that question out there. Why does it do that?
Well,
out of the goodness of its heart.
I would say it at least looks good. It makes them seem like they're doing something of use.
Well, the last thing is that it creates a much larger worker base.
Even like people going into Google, you're saying?
Going into programming, right? And a lot of those people will end up at Google.
Does the cost actually, like, will it work out for them? You know what I'm saying?
So there's a little complicated. It doesn't perfectly work out for them, but it ends up working out for them some. Because they end up getting the cream. They get to pick the cream of the crop. That's effectively what they end up doing, right? So they don't end up reducing their salaries because that looks bad. But what they end up doing is they end up getting higher quality workers.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, for the same money. So, Google doesn't do this out of the kindness of their heart. Google does this so that you dream and long to be a Google engineer. That's the goal, right? And you're a child, so you don't have as much, awareness of the depravity of the world. So, of course, you believe it. And when you grow up, it becomes a dream, and it becomes emotional, and it's highly incorporated into your psyche. And they think like this. So, I mean, guys, just go listen to quarterly meetings of these companies, Wall Street quarterly meetings. Sometimes if you detach yourself from what's going on, they kind of sound like psychopaths. And they sound like just the most crazy people, the way they talk about humans. And they talk about children a lot because it's an investment that's quite easy to get. And the last thing is killing internal competitors. Meaning cannibalizing yourself. This only applies to old companies. So if you're Disney, and you want to get on the debt train. You want to join the debt revolution. Well, what are some of the promises of the debt revolution? It's you'll always have money coming in no matter what, whether it's debt or you're owning people's entertainment, let's say, in this case for Disney. Like, oh, we could just always have a $20 payment coming from every American or every person in the whole world, right? Like, that's a pretty good deal, right? So, and on top of that, that increases our ability to have debt. So what does Disney do? It creates Disney Plus. And what does it have to do in order to drive people to Disney Plus? It has to kill its former outlets. It has to self-cannibalize. So, let's take an example of Star Wars. What was Star Wars really for? Bless you. What was Star Wars really for? Was it for the ratings that they would get in the box office? I mean, of course they want to make tons of box office money. Or was it the start of a whole universe that they were going to build on top of Disney Plus? Right? Does it really matter if the next Star Wars film is actually good if it gets people to think about shows like The Mandalorian? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they end up self-cannibalizing.
Is that something they can actually rely on, though?
It worked.
I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, would you actually say that people were interested in The Mandalorian because of the Star Wars films?
Well, no. I mean, they made a good series too, which helps. But I would say that they wouldn't have launched Disney Plus without first relaunching in the cinema as an advertisement. You know.
I suppose. Do you think that's sustainable?
No. No, I don't.
I don't think that. I think their investment in Star Wars is not producing what they hope, and right, they just closed Galaxy's Edge right after spending. I think the loss in that is like almost $2 billion by a lot of estimates.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, we'll get to the future in a moment, because that's where this all goes to. But the other ways to eliminate the opposing ball manufacturers, right, is corporate buyouts. You just buy them off, and you offer the same ball for the $1. So instead of eliminating this, let's see if I can back out of here. Okay, whatever, I can't, but that's okay. Instead of eliminating the $10 ball, you just buy it. You just take it, and then you sell it for $1. Like, that's what you do. Like that's the insanity of what you're doing, you know. And then, and taking is a strong word. Obviously, the entity has to assent to it to some degree. Although with Snapchat, famously, Facebook said either incorporate yourself into us and let us buy you out, or we'll mimic all your functions. Which, if you look at Messenger, they did. They made good on that promise. That's according to the Snapchat CEO. There was a lawsuit. Blah blah blah. The other anti-competitive way that you can go about yourself is to use your platform as a bully for all your competitors. So if you have a platform, like if you're social media or your store, the literal store itself or the social media thing can systematically eliminate things that are competitive to you, right? That's the power of algorithms, right? This famously happened to Rumble. Rumble has a huge lawsuit with Google. Why do they have a huge lawsuit with Google? That's gone very far, actually. I'm so excited because I think they might win it because they were very clever with how they investigated. They knew it was happening. Instead of immediately suing, they proved it, and that was a very shrewd decision on Rumble's part. But what was happening to Rumble was they were being ranked sometimes nowhere on the first page of Google when their videos had way more page hits than the YouTube version. So the YouTube version would appear first, even though it had 1,000 views, but the Rumble version would have 2 million views and appear on page 3. The antitrust laws that have been applied to Google's search engine require that Google be a fair play. Like it can't favor itself in search, right? So it does. It does favor itself in search. And that's the lawsuit that's happening with Rumble and Google. Because they're scared of Rumble, ultimately, and that will come to the future aspect of this whole thing. And then, let's go back to Empire real quick. Remember the rule of resources, which hasn't come into play into anything I've said so far. But it's important now because, remember, the person who buys the resources dictates policy. What happens when you deindustrialize your country and give away your manufacturing to other countries? What ultimately happens is you are no longer the buyer of the resource. Does this make sense? You look like you are because you're like the richest country, right? You're buying something from somewhere. Well, you're not buying the raw resource anymore. So, for example, you are, let's say you're, I don't know what country to make an example of, but I don't know, some South American country, and you're mining cobalt, right? And your buyer used to be directly the United States. But now the batteries that cobalt is made out of, or the batteries that use cobalt in them, are now made in China. Who is the ultimate buyer of the resource? It's China. So who does that South American country care about? Not you. It cares about China, right? So you, the fool, thought that you were just, you weren't giving away anything. You were just getting everything cheaper, right? By exporting your manufacturing to other countries. But now other countries have more say in the policy in those resource countries, which is not a moral statement at all. I'm not saying it's bad or good that the United States does not have this control. I'm just saying that's just the fact of it, right? So what happens to the buyers is that they become empires, right? At least if they so choose to be. One such example would be China. In that example, that's a pretty real example. Becomes an empire because we gave it to them. We gave them the empire, right? We gave them the policy control over these countries, right? So, you thought, like an idiot, that you weren't giving away anything, but you were giving away your entire empire, right? So what happens is because they control policy, they also become very wealthy. Them becoming very wealthy makes it so that there's another market where you can sell that $1 ball for $1 elsewhere. And these people are always trying to increase their user base because it's one way of shrinking the ball. So, they go over to China and they say, well, there's like 3 billion people here. so that's a huge audience. How do we get to market the same business model in China? And now, what do you have occur? The same melting that's occurring with the companies and the United States government is going to occur with whatever other empire. Again, these are morally neutral statements. Some other empire is going to melt with these companies as well. Does that make sense? So, because they become important. They become a market, right? We change the rule of resources for ourselves. And the last thing is social contagion becomes a huge factor. Now, again, let's focus on that $3 billion user number for Netflix. Can they afford to lose any of that 3 billion pie next year? No, they always have to grow. They always have to grow. So what ends up happening is if there's a social contagion, whatever social movement you want, doesn't matter what it is. If there's a social contagion, they cannot afford to ignore it. It becomes a risk, right? Because the part of their pie might go away. So, if people would be angry if such and such actor were in a film, even though such and such actor was acquitted of all charges of XYZ, right? But people would be angry if, the vocal minority would be, it doesn't have to be the majority of people, because they can't afford to lose any, you understand? Any. So they have to go with the social tide hard. The economics dictate this, right? In order to keep increasing their user base. what ends up happening, ultimately, is they end up reflecting exactly that social contagion, even though it was a vocal minority, and they end up overrepresenting it. Entirely overrepresenting it. Entirely dictated by the economics. Even though you say, wait, but like 60% of people are mad, so mad, that they did this to Star Wars for some social concern, right? They're betting that less of those people will be mad than the other vocal minority. And it's a good bet, by the way, in the short term. And we'll talk about the future. But it was a good bet. And you'd be lying to say it wasn't. It was the correct answer, economically, was to go with the vocal minority because they were the only ones who were willing to walk out. You see? So, that's why they end up reflecting those forces.
Is that even true? I mean, didn't Solo lose money?
Yeah, but that's one example. And Solo's much later. Much later in the
Solo was what, 5 months after The Last Jedi? And, yeah.
After the Last Jedi is the last of the trilogy, or
no?
Or wait, which one is that one? Sorry,
the eighth one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but like, ultimately, it all ends up being a wash. Like, who cares? Like, Solo didn't fail, I don't think, because of social reasons. Solo failed just because no one really liked it.
Well, there are lots of people who just say they're not going to watch it because of how much they dislike The Last Jedi.
But then how many of those people ended up watching Episode 9 and then buying a Disney Plus subscription?
I probably not that many.
I don't know. The numbers don't bear that out. That's the problem. Like, a lot of people...
The people who hated The Last Jedi and no longer participated in Star Wars.
Yeah, no, there are people like that. Yeah, no, I agree. But I'm saying...
Certainly.
No,
I haven't seen The Rise of Skywalker. I'm not going to waste my time watching it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I'm saying for every one of you, there's like 10 people who say that and then end up doing it, you know. Anyway, you know. So it doesn't really ultimately matter. You know?
I question that because, for instance, let's say, you know, Disney has made 0 Star Wars movies in, 3.5 years? They just, claimed after, having made a whole bunch of announcements over the years of things that are coming and then having to cancel them, right? That the next Star Wars film is going to come out in another 3.5 years.
But the problem is the film is no longer the product. It's Disney Plus now, you know? That's how they've transferred their attention, you know? They don't... the film isn't as important as Disney Plus is, right, in this debt-driven model.
Sure, but the Star Wars Disney Plus is doing worse and worse as it goes along.
Yes, and that brings... I agree with you that ultimately that these things end up failing, but I think in the medium term, they all prove to be correct decisions, right? Like, when Disney looked at and said, was it right to have Rian Johnson on, change all this stuff, or what's her face, Kathleen something?
Kathleen Kennedy.
Have Kathleen Kennedy come back. Or no, that was actually way later on. But have Kathleen Kennedy in charge of creative of XYZ thing, because they didn't want to piss off or they wanted to entice a certain small sector of the audience. They were correct in saying that the ratio of people who we lose, at least in the short term of that decision making, is less if we go with the Kathleen Kennedy route than if we go with the general audience route in the short term.
I'm not entirely sure what you're saying. I'm not sure that you could find statistics that necessarily back that up. What I think you're saying is that Kathleen Kennedy's saying the Force is female and choosing to make the main character female, right? The amount of people that decision alienated from Star Wars is less than the number of people who were attracted to Star Wars because of that.
No, alienated successfully so that they did not spend money on it or did not buy Disney Plus, right?
Right.
So I guess the idea is
Can
that,
you?
like,
But wait, how? Where? I'm not sure. There's like a way you could back up the claim that anybody chose to or didn't choose to watch Star Wars on account of Rey being female.
Money. It's just the money coming in. Like you just look at to see whether or not you. I guess you could say, okay, you don't know what the alternate universe would have been.
But you're
right?
selecting one factor out of why people may have liked or not liked that film, and I'm not sure how you isolate that.
Well, I mean, I would say that the hot button issue for these films were the social factors, right? Like I would say that, and maybe I can't.
You mean the social factors are why people did or didn't like them?
No, liking has nothing to do with it. But people will buy something they don't like anyway. That's the phenomenon, right?
I'm not sure I agree.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't think. I think okay. So my understanding, right, is that Disney's intent, or at least Kathleen Kennedy's intent, and obviously just in general, Bob Iger at the time and now once again, the intent was to okay, so I guess the intent is that if they forced a female to be a main character, right, which is there's not a problem with that in Star Wars, right? I mean, obviously there are probably a handful of human beings, out there who have an issue with that, but we can discard 100 people or so, right? Who are clearly misogynist, but. So their intent though was that this would somehow make more women interested in the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that women were not interested because they needed a main character to be the same gender as them, but this is not by the same logic though by the same logic though they're misreading, like they had to be assuming that a man, right, by the same token, women don't like it because the main character of Star Wars have been men, but men will still like Star Wars equally as much if the main character is a woman. Seems like flawed logic. To me,
I don't know if
I
it's
think
that they
doesn't
would like it more or less, but that they might be subconsciously attracted. You know what I'm saying? I don't know by how much, but I think that would be the argument, is that I subconsciously, and it's not necessarily that women would be more attracted to a woman lead or whatever. It's not restricted to women being attracted to a woman lead, right? It could be women and men in general or whatever, right? It doesn't matter who. It's just that there's more people, right? Whatever group, I guess.
Well, to me, this seems like suspect logic that women need a female main character to enjoy Star Wars, but the same men should still enjoy it even though the main character isn't a man, right? It is operating of a logic that one needs to see same gender or race, right, in order to identify with and like a character. Seems like flawed logic, but assuming that seems to be what Disney's logic is, however flawed it is, right? Why? How can we say though, even if that is true, right? That's what they ended up doing. That's why they did what they did. That these films ultimately lost money as the trilogy went along, right? Why? I'm not sure we can attribute this solely to social reasons, right?
I think I don't think I agree. I don't think I disagree with a lot of the. I'm not saying like any I'm not saying it's like the woman lead in particular. Like there are a plethora of decisions that are made that are to appease a small vocal minority, right? Like for example, the prominence of Rose and whichever one that was, she gets swapped in, which kind of ruins the whole story structure. So it's just not a smart writing decision, but it's done anyway to appease a small vocal minority who would not otherwise give a crap about Star Wars. You see what I'm saying? So
right. Now, but can you demonstrate that by doing that they made money in the short term or even medium term?
I think so, because their attendance. I mean, yeah, okay. Along the trilogy, right? You have less and less attendance. I get that, right? And
right. They progressively made less and less money.
Right, and I will get to. That's the future, right? Like, but in the short term, what looks like happens is that you have a 5% attrition, right, of people who are upset by the decisions made. I'm not just throwing the 5% number out there. I don't know what it is, right? Whatever attrition by the people who are upset that it was made, and you have some gain of a vocal minority who cares a lot more than, extremely more about the contents of the film than the majority. And then, not only that, what you do is you create... The point is not to put more butts in this theater. The point is to put more butts on Disney+, right? So, ultimately, what you do is you say, okay, what we're going to have on Disney+ is we're going to have a coalition of both. Because the fans are not going to be able to resist getting onto Disney+, by and large. There are going to be some people who don't. That's fine. But we're also going to have this other contingency of an extra 15% of people who will join Disney Plus because now they've been exposed to Star Wars and are a fan of what the company's doing. That works out in the short term. I
just don't understand where you're getting like the causality, right? How can you, unless you have like surveys of Disney Plus users, right? Like I elected to purchase a Disney Plus subscription because Disney made X choice in movie that I probably didn't care that much about.
Yeah, well, okay.
Unless you have that, I don't.
Yeah, okay. I don't have survey numbers or anything like that. I guess it's based off of my observation and what they say in their quarterly meetings, right? Like it's. What
did they say in their quarterly meetings that could, other than just raw random numbers that don't have to necessarily do with Star Wars?
Well, they have to. No, they talk about Star Wars. They talk about their franchises individually, right? Like Star Wars is such a big part of their company now. So yeah, no, they'll mention, that okay, we have energy coming from this part of the Star Wars base. We have X amount of new people. They'll give a number to it. I don't remember these numbers. I don't have them off top.
How do they determine the number though? Like
market research.
It's a Disney Plus subscription. So how do they know? How do they actually know that my Disney Plus subscription is primarily because of Star Wars?
I mean, they do sample some small amount of users with a pre-survey. I don't know, however they do it, or maybe it's from data tracking or something. I don't know. They figure out some way to know. They have to know these numbers because they have to know what's going on in their business. So. I mean, I would contend that in the short term, that's what ended up playing out. You had tons of Star Wars fans joining Disney Plus. I mean, you had tons of people just joining because the show on there was not abusive to them. The whatever show they made next was actually good. But the thing is, what you had in addition to that fan base is you had a new fan base coming from the socially minded crowd that joined as well. So it worked in that sense. You see what I mean?
I would be really curious to know, like the hard numbers, that indicate that there's like any person who elects to, purchase a Disney Plus subscription solely because of some social thing in Star Wars.
It's not solely, right? It's like it's the activation energy, right? It's not like they wake up one day and they're like,
even
wow.
primarily because of that.
It doesn't
Otherwise,
matter.
there's just too many factors.
It's the gateway for the person being able to even care. That's the point, right? It's like they say, like, let me give you a great example that's outside of Star Wars. Black Panther.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Black Panther is undeniably made so much money because of its social implications, right? So the way they accomplish this is by pushing the social implication. What it doesn't, like, Black Panther is a little different in the sense that it doesn't alienate anybody. So, okay, they did that right, I guess. But like, what I'm saying is, like, there's a whole sector of people who did not watch Marvel movies prior to Black Panther, and now they're much more likely to watch the next one. And then there's a core fan base that, even if it did contain something that was alienating to them, would still go on to watch the next one.
So I can't really speak to the Star Wars thing because I haven't watched the. I've only watched the first two of the sequel trilogy. I didn't watch the last one. I don't know if I really know many people who did watch the last one, you know. But I did watch Black Panther, and I don't watch Marvel movies. I was essentially pushed to by people who also don't watch Marvel movies because of the social implications. But yeah, I haven't seen, like, I don't think I've seen a single Avengers. Like, I am very disconnected from the Marvel universe. I've seen like two Iron Mans.
But I would contend that there's a quantitative and qualitative difference in that Black Panther actually made a difference in, like, popular culture. People actually talked about it. I have not
why
encountered
did they talk about
any. Why? I mean, that's beyond the scope of what I can tell you.
What I'm saying, Disney pushed. That's the whole, like, marketing behind the film. Is that, like, they don't tell you to watch the film because it's good. They tell you to watch it because of its social implications.
Okay, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I think there's a quantitative and qualitative difference between that, which actually had an impact on the broader culture, and any decision in Star Wars sequel trilogy, right? Because I don't know anyone, and I've never seen any kind of discussion of this. Right? I don't know anybody who's energized by that.
It might be the circles that you're in, but I see it. I definitely see it. I see people who say, I'm going to go to see these films to promote these messages. Yeah. No, I definitely
I would love for you to share that with me.
Yeah. I'd go on Twitter right now and find all of it.
In my experience, there's no reverberations of any of these things in the broader culture, right? Like, I don't use Twitter, right? And that's not how I would judge the world, right? I can understand that Black Panther was a thing, even though I'd never seen a single Marvel movie, because people talked about it, right? And it's like in the newspapers and whatever. Nobody talks about that kind of stuff with the Star Wars films. No, it's nowhere in,
I don't think so. I don't think that's right at all. I think there's tons of articles written about the social implications of Star Wars. Tons and tons. Lots.
I'm not aware. I mean, maybe, like a few things in select publications that, tend to focus on that, but I'm really not aware of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can, in the Discord, we'll have some stuff on there. But, like, and you guys should check out the Discord, by the way. But my contention, and you can disagree or just agree, and in the chat tell me what you think. But my contention is that there is an era where it did not matter whether or not the Disney movie alienated the audience, but what ultimately mattered was that they brought on new users. That's my contention. There was an era, probably up until, like, literally, like, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, like, pretty large era, where the social aspects of the things they created brought a new user base to these $1 ball platforms, right? Going back to our analogy, increasing the user base while not simultaneously appreciably decreasing the user base from the people who feel alienated. That has changed. Maybe in the past 2 or 3 years. Maybe that's even stretching it. Maybe past 2 years that's changed, right? But that was more to my future point, like what needs to be done in order to break the cycle, the infinite cycle of money, right? Let's see here. So, excuse me. Because they can't afford to lose anybody, they lean hard into whatever social thing of the day. Now, what ends up happening when there is legitimate backlash, not just people angry online saying, you know, this time is too far, blah, 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 but people who actually won't buy the $1 ball, that is when you see the change, right? So, like, what's a good example of this? There's some examples in commodities, but they're not $1 balls. But maybe there's not even an example of this yet.
By the way, it's getting kind of late. I gotta go to work tomorrow, so
okay. Well, this is actually my last point. This is my last point. Yeah. So my last point here is that the future of this whole system. So we go from the financial sector, we go from empire, we go from that to debt-driven economy, and we go all the way down into the products being made that aren't actually efficient or useful for the end user. What you do is stop buying it. That is the solution. At the end of the day, the stress that you put on the whole system is you not buying into it. And the thing is, that's hard to do. Because, at the end of the day, the choice that you're given is buy the $1 ball or buy the $10 ball. Or don't buy a ball at all. Right? I'm asking you to consider whether perpetuating the system is worth you simply not buying a ball. Or buying the $10 ball. That's what I'm asking you. The only way, the casualty in the whole thing, in this whole debt-driven economy, is the art form. That's my point, right? So, what happens to movies when Netflix doesn't succeed in selling the $1 ball? There will become a day where they cannot continue the infinite money machine. When that day arrives, movies die. But Netflix survives because they have debt for tomorrow. Does it make sense? Like, they don't have to stay in the movie industry. They can move to the gaming industry. And that's what always happens with these $1 balls. So, Netflix just goes on to make game streaming. Google just goes on to make Google Stadia, right? Whatever it is. Spotify, right, might fail in music. What happens to music? It just dies. They don't care. Like, you know, like the culture of music, they don't care about perpetuating the culture of music. Their business model doesn't make any sense. So what they do is they just go on to the next thing, which might be podcasts. You see? And then when they try to sell their $1 ball in podcasts, and they shrink the ball, and they can no longer convince Wall Street that the ball is actually worth $10 at the end of the day, is they just discard the ball and get a new one. That's all that happens. So the reason for this discussion, which I hopefully was illuminating and eye-opening, was that the source of the whole thing is not simply companies gone wild. That's not how it works, right? Like, you know, it's not just people making individual decisions and going nuts, and it's economically driven. Economically driven. The economics, again, come from dollar hegemony, come from the government, and come from, ultimately, our banking system, which helps to create these zombie companies. So that was my overall point, which is the way you resist is to stop buying into it. That's how you resist. That's how you create competition again. And monetary policy matters if you're a filmmaker. Surprise, surprise. So if you want to have your art form back again, stop allowing policy that furthers the debt-driven economy that we have. Advocate for it. I don't have to tell you what exact solution you have to advocate for. So long as you're advocating in that direction, I'm happy. All right? Do your own research, right? Come up with your own conclusions. So, yeah, that's my segment.
That was a long segment. That was good, I guess.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, if you've gotten yeah, use the whiteboard. If you've gotten all the way through that, please hit the thumbs up button. That was a lot of work to put together. And also, let us know what you feel about the whole thing. Like, what do you agree with, disagree with, what you see, don't understand. Let us know in the comments and the chat. And also, our link to our Discord is in the description if you want to go check that out. We're always discussing topics we talk about on the show over there. And we'll be back next week at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for more discussions. Oh, I forgot. 4 awesome people who are supporting us on Locals: 99 Crime, Rob Sharma, Post, and K Kairos. They're supporting us for $5 a month at mixedmedia.locals.com. You can head over there if you want to see what kinds of perks that you get for supporting the podcast. And again, you can join the lively discussion by joining us next week and chatting along, which we always love when that happens. So there you go. Did I forget anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, have a good week.
Good night.
Odie.
Look, tell a man no trouble. I don't want beef, man. I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then dead I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas is. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. You know, like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We back, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm all righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone.